My next life as a villainess, all routes lead to doom. Volume 12. Chapter 1, Everyday Life. A little girl was running around the garden of Clay's manor as the warm sunlight poured down from above. I, Katarina Clays, felt my own heart brighten just by watching her enjoy herself. On my day off from the magical ministry, I sat down in a chair placed in the garden, and soaked in the soothing sight of this child, while eating the sweets that had been prepared on the table in front of me. How can I even express what a wonderful time I was having? As I grew more and more relaxed, the sight of the little girl caused me to remember my own childhood. I spent my life as the selfish, self-important daughter of a noble family up until one day when I was 8 years old. I fell down in the garden of a castle and regained the memories of my past life. The memories from my life as a high school girl in a country called Japan. As I grew accustomed to these memories, I became a thoroughly good girl. More seriously, I realized that this was the world of an Otome game I had played in my past life until just before my death, a game called Fortune Lover. Then I realized that I had been reborn as the game's villainess, whose every route would lead to a bad end. In order to somehow avoid my doom, I put a wide range of plans into practice. In order to strengthen my magic, I started tilling a field. I honed my skills in swordplay. And I dedicated myself to crafting increasingly realistic toy snakes. 7 years later, I finally entered the Academy of Magic, the stage for the game's story, and met the game's heroine, Maria. Bring it on, bad ends. Or so I eagerly thought, but though the game produced its share of crises, it concluded with a friendship end, and I was able to avoid each of the bad ends unscathed. After moving up to the next grade, I faced several strange incidents such as kidnappings, my brother's and my own, but I solved these problems too, and was eventually able to graduate from the academy and enter employment at the magical ministry. Now then, it's time to do my best as a working member of society. I thought to fire myself up, but then there came a shocking revelation. Believe it or not, Fortune Lover had a sequel. Its title was Fortune Lover 2, Love at the Magical Ministry. In this game, after graduating from the academy, our protagonist Maria starts working at the magical ministry, fosters a deeper romance with the target of her previous conquest, and can even fall in love with an all-new conquest. When I first learned of this, I was worried, but after really thinking it over, I realized that, after the events of the original Fortune Lover, the villainess, Katarina Clays, would have either been killed or exiled from this kingdom. I had entered employment at the magical ministry, but the Katarina of the game had not. That being the case, there was no problem. There was no chance of doom left. However, the relief I felt was fleeting, dashed by the sight in my dreams of Katarina the villainess on a game screen, wearing a hood and making her return. And what awaited her after that was, as expected, doom. This time, instead of exile outside the kingdom, I could expect a lengthy prison sentence. Just when I'd thought I'd managed to avoid every bad end, a new series of bad ends emerged, and my days of avoiding them began once again. For starters, I occupied my days practicing using the dark magic I had obtained by coincidence to create a smoke screen I could use when I needed to run away, and fumbling around for a method of escape I could use if I ended up imprisoned. But then I discovered that the events of Fortune Lover 2 would be over in another 6 months. I made up my mind, thinking, all right, in that case I just need to hold on for another 6 months, and I'll have avoided a bad end once again. As I was stringing these words together in my head, and looking up at the sky. These sweets here are also delicious. Please try one, suggested a beautiful girl with reddish-brown hair and eyes. Thank you, Mary. I'll help myself, then, I said, popping one of the treats Mary had recommended to me into my mouth. Yummy. As I said this, the girl who had been running around the garden came over. She then fixed her gaze on the sweet I was holding in my hand. Do you want one? I asked. After looking a bit startled, she nodded slightly. Here you go, I said, taking another one and handing it to the girl, whose face broke into a smile. The girl hesitated before saying thank you, in a tiny voice, then stuffed the sweet in her mouth. The sight of her chewing with her round cheeks puffed out was adorable. How cute, I said without thinking. Mary added, well, of course. Naturally our child would be extremely cute, in a boastful manner. After Mary called the girl over and brushed away the crumbs stuck to her mouth, the girl grinned and ran off into the garden once again. Ah, so cute. Yes, she truly is. As we murmured these words to each other, a voice came from behind. Whose pipsqueak is that? Turning around at the sound of this familiar, slightly rough voice, we were greeted by the sight of the fourth-born prince, Alan, with his silver hair and blue eyes. And standing next to him was his older twin, Jedward, the third-born prince, who had blonde hair and blue eyes. At Alan's question, Mary answered without hesitation, she's my child. Alan, startled, opened his eyes wide. You're kidding me. When on earth did you give birth to her? Though I should ask, who on earth is the father? Smiling at the extremely confused Alan, Mary giggled, and answered with a smile, why, she's mine and Katerina's child. Hey. A child born between two women. No, I mean, since when are you and Katerina? At this point, Alan's mind was completely tangled up. Watching Alan's agitation with an indescribable look on his face, Jedward finally opened his mouth. Alan, calm down. This is only a mean-spirited joke. That girl is the daughter of Miss Mary's second eldest sister, and is therefore her niece. Hey, niece, replied Alan blankly. Mary's face fell now that Jedward had spoiled her fun, and she responded, oh dear, I don't like this. So it seems that you were aware. I, who had figured that Mary was probably just teasing Alan and hadn't butted in, couldn't say anything, and only smiled ambiguously. That was right, the girl running around my family's garden was the child of Mary's second eldest sister, her little niece. Right now, Mary's big sister was pregnant with her second child and couldn't move around too much. Unable to play actively with her little girl, she had entrusted her daughter to Aunt Mary's care. When I first heard this from Mary, I was shocked. That's because, up until then, I had understood that Mary wasn't on good terms with her half-sisters, who had a different mother. So Mary explained to me how she had mended her relationship with her second eldest sister. My second eldest sister began a romance with her now husband, whom she met during her time at the academy, and then they were wed. At the time, both my sister and her husband had been engaged to other partners, but in both cases they were able to break off their engagements amicably. What's more, they received their former betrothed's blessings. However, her husband's parents had doted on his former fiancée from the time that she was very young, and had looked forward to their marriage and to having her join their household. They saw my big sister as having pushed the former fiancé aside, and they shunned her terribly for it. Mary's elder sister, who had gone through all of that to get married and join her husband's household, revealed that she was forced to live with scornful remarks from her in-laws. Though she seldom brought it up in front of her husband, whenever she wasn't at work, she was subjected to a constant barrage of scorn. While living under those circumstances, she recalled what she had done to Mary. Finding herself in a similar position, she finally realized how cruelly, and foolishly, she had treated her younger sister. Oh, what have I done? She thought to herself. She was sure that if she went to apologize to her little sister after all this time, Mary wouldn't forgive her. On the contrary, Mary might rebuke her. Thinking this, she couldn't summon the courage. But after she gave birth to her first child, and her delighted husband left the scene, her in-laws sneered, neither in the color of her hair nor the color of her eyes does this baby resemble our son. We can't be sure that she is our son's child. Any child of a mother who would steal another woman's fiancé warrants suspicion, don't you think? On hearing this, apparently Mary's sister had snapped. Even though they had certainly got together with his former fiancé's blessing, Mary's sister had been labeled as having pushed the former fiancé aside. She had put up with it at first because her accusers were her husband's parents, but once they had insulted the child she had risked her life to give birth to, she could no longer keep her mouth shut. Apparently she raised her voice against their abuse. Instead of letting them speak to her as they like, she finally spoke back, and told her husband what she had put up with for all that time. Then they had the idea to contact his former fiancée, and have her tell his parents her side of the story. That former fiancée turned out to be quite the bold lady herself, saying to the bullying in-laws, "In the first place, I never had any romantic feelings for him. As his childhood friend, I gave him my blessing when he at last found someone he loved. Learning that you were the sort of people to bully my friend's beloved wife, I now feel disillusioned." Mary's sister reported that after hearing such a declaration, her in-laws eventually revised their attitude toward her. Her sister had actually followed Mary's example when she lost her temper in that way, remembering when Mary had become stronger herself. The truth was, back when she was a little girl, Mary could only listen to her older sister's insults, hanging her head in silence. But she had gradually grown stronger and sturdier, and one day started to talk back, and look straight ahead with her head held high. She was thereafter a strong and commanding young lady. Remembering how Mary had carried herself in those days, Mary's sister decided that she, too, would no longer hang her head as others spoke ill of her, and would look straight ahead instead. Thus, after she solved the problem in her household, and her physical condition had recovered sufficiently, she made her way to meet with Mary. She then apologized deeply for everything she had done in the past. "I am not so shameless as to expect you to forgive me. But I at least wanted to apologize. And I wanted to thank you, for it was thanks to you that I was able to change. I'm sorry for everything up until now. And thank you." So said Mary's sister, bowing her head low. Of course, Mary was not able to forgive everything at once, but ever since that turn of events, they had striven to deepen their bond, and little by little, their relationship had improved. Eventually, they had become close enough that now Mary was able to take care of her sister's daughter when her sister's condition was not so good. My second eldest sister more or less obeyed my eldest sister, so even though, if forced to describe her, I would say that she was originally a quiet type, like I once was, but recently she has started to defend me, speaking up sternly against my eldest sister, who still despises me and speaks to me with scorn. I was genuinely shocked when that happened. I suppose people can change if they want to. Speaking on this topic, Mary's expression turned shy, and she almost looked like a small child herself. With that series of events, Mary's little niece, who was in her care again today, had come here to play, but I wondered why Alan, her fiancé, knew nothing about this, and why Jedward did know about it. "I had already ascertained that much information," said Jedward with a smile that was somehow dark. "Yet, he's the kind of guy I really wouldn't want as my enemy. But to think Mary has a little niece. Normally speaking, I guess it wouldn't be unusual if we had nephews and nieces of our own," Alan let slip. Certainly, Alan and Jedward had two older brothers, who had fiancés of their own. Normally speaking, at their age, they would have already been married, and it wouldn't be unusual if they had had children by now. The typical age of marriage in this world was young, though by the standards of my past life, I would say very young. By the standards of this world, the firstborn Prince Geoffrey and his fiancée, Susanna, were quite tardy for not yet marrying. My elder brother Ian is a straight-laced sort, so he is probably thinking, as long as elder brother Geoffrey has not yet wed Susanna, or something to that effect, Jedward speculated. Speaking of Ian, the second-born prince, he had futilely tried to keep his distance from his fiancée, citing as his reason, "My fiancée Selina is just too adorable, and I end up feeling like I might end up touching her. Even though I know I mustn't come in contact with her before we are married." He had remained so distant that, as a result, his fiancée Selina had even worried that Ian disliked her. Although, that misunderstanding had since been resolved, and apparently they were lovey-dovey now. Straight-laced. He certainly did give off that impression. Yet, I know what elder brother Ian is likely thinking too, but I wonder how long elder brother Jeffrey plans to carry on like that. It couldn't be that he's on bad terms with Miss Susanna, his fiancée, added a puzzled-looking Alan. I had thought the same thing. I had met the two of them together many times, and they always seemed to be getting along well. Well, in their case, I believe there are all sorts of reasons. Jedward was lost for words for a moment, as if he'd just thought of something. Eventually he continued. However, putting elder brother Jeffrey's thinking to one side, those around him are growing more and more impatient. Right, you mean the people in elder brother Jeffrey's faction. Though referred to as the four Stewart brothers, chiefly speaking, it was the two eldest brothers who each had their own faction. Nominally, the two were hostile. The fact that, behind the scenes, the four brothers got along well, was known only to a few close-knit confidants, including me. No one outside this group was aware of how friendly the four princes truly were. Yes, Miss Susanna's father, Marquis Randall, seems to be growing especially dissatisfied, and has voiced his complaints here and there. Hearing these words from Jedward, Alan grumbled, Marquis Randall, that old geezer. I just hope it doesn't lead to any trouble. After speaking in that fashion, Alan's expression turned sullen. Excuse me, I'd prefer if you didn't bring up such seemingly unpeaceful subjects in the peaceful gardens of Clay's Manor. Even if Mary's little niece waving excitedly at us from far away can't hear you, Mary and I can. Wisely, Mary and I had paid no attention to their conversation, but to call it a subject that had nothing to do with us really wouldn't wash. Presently, Mary and I were the fiancés of these two princes, and in this kingdom where the heir to the throne was not necessarily the eldest child, but was selected by the current ruler, our positions could not be said to be unrelated. There is a possibility that he might perhaps abandon elder brother Jeffrey, who is incapable of deception, and approach you or me. If that time comes, please be careful. You are, after all, simple and easily fooled. At these words from Jedward, Alan frowned. Why, you? How can you speak to your own little brother like that? It's because you are my own little brother that I'm doing you the favor of telling you this, answered Jedward nonchalantly, prompting a shrug and a sigh from Alan. I wonder if Alan thought to himself, I can't beat him in a contest of words. Though I'm afraid that's exactly right. I can't beat Jedward either. Prince Jedward is only worried about his precious little brother. He is simply not someone who can be honest about such things, which is why he ends up expressing himself in this way, explained Mary, looking at Alan and Jedward with the same gaze she had turned upon her little niece. Jedward's face twitched slightly. Lady Mary Hunt, he started to say something, but with Mary's imperious gaze upon him, it looked like he swallowed his words. Prince Jedward, I will also keep a close eye on Prince Alan, who happens to be your precious little brother, Mary added with a broad smile. Please do, Jedward eventually responded, his cheek twitching slightly. Alan, who had two guardians worrying over him, wore a terribly complicated expression. As I was used to receiving the same treatment from everyone else, I walked up beside him, patted him on the shoulder, and said, Never mind them, turning a warm gaze upon him. As soon as I did so, Alan assumed a sour expression. Hey, what is that supposed to mean? I mean never mind your guardians, however much they worry about you, I answered, my gaze growing more lukewarm. By guardians, do you mean Jedward and Mary? Yes. Of course that's who I meant. I nodded enthusiastically. Well, I mean, Jedward and Mary are certainly upstanding people. If I'm being quite generous, no, very generous, I suppose I can't object to you calling them my guardians. What I can't stand is you looking at me with such a pitying look on your face. A child like you, who has guardians picking up after you at every turn, fumed Alan, raising his voice and pointing a finger squarely at me. Oh, you think you're so perfect. Even I've managed to become somewhat respectable. Though others often still needed to pick up after me, I was doing a respectable job as an employee of the magical ministry. I didn't always require support from others. Ah, so you yourself admit that you only somewhat have it together. Compared to you, I am still more dependable. Grr, that's not it was, perhaps true that Alan was still slightly more dependable than me. As I growled at Alan, he smirked back triumphantly. See, you are more childish after all, Alan sneered like a neighborhood bully as he ruffled my hair. Grr. I puffed up my cheeks and glared at Alan. I was aware that I made a lot of trouble for Jedward and Keith, and had come to accept that they would treat me like a child, but I couldn't put up with the same treatment from Alan. Jedward and his other brothers had always acted grown up beyond their years, but Alan used to be more childish than me, and much more of a brat. Alan continued to mercilessly ruffle my hair as I tried to think of a retort, but then his hand suddenly seemed to stop. Alan, you must not touch a woman's hair in such a casual fashion, spoke Jedward with a smile as he pulled Alan's hand away. Quite right, Prince Alan, you mustn't do that, Mary chimed in, likewise with a smile. Their tone of voice was that of a parent scolding a child, but their smiles seemed to give off a more menacing impression. Right, Alan belatedly managed to answer, as if overwhelmed by the dark smiles of his older brother and fiancé. The air around each of his guardians started to appear more and more similar. Ah, Princes Jedward and Alan, and Mary too. Just when did you barge into our home unannounced? Keith entered the scene from behind the two wearing dark smiles. Past him, I spied the Ascot siblings. It seemed that those two had come to see me, and Keith had brought them through. It also appeared that they were unaware that Mary, Jedward, and Alan were already here. It's a little rude of you to say that I barged in. I received proper permission from the servants of Clay's Manor, replied Jedward. Mary gave a similar reply. No word of that made its way to me. I suppose you've already won our servants over, grumbled Keith wearily. Well, you might say that I'm already part of the family, countered Jedward with a smile. As am I, said Mary, again with a smile. I had known Jedward, Alan, and Mary, as well as Sophia and Nicole, for over 10 years, during which time they had visited my home frequently. So it really wouldn't be surprising if the servants considered them family and immediately waved them through the front door. That's just how close we all were. Lady Katarina, having heard that you had the day off, I've come to see you with a book I recommend in hand, exclaimed Sophia, approaching me with a big smile on her face. I wondered the same thing about Mary and Jedward, but how did everyone know that I had the day off? Don't get me wrong, I was very pleased to see them, given I had this break, but I simply found myself wondering why. Tea please. Straight after Sophia greeted me, Mary's little niece returned to the table. Apparently, she was thirsty. Even her lisp was adorable. My, what family do you belong to, young lady? Said Sophia, speaking to Mary's niece, who, apparently only just realizing that she was now among people she didn't know, hid behind Mary, looking embarrassed. Whereupon Mary replied, "She's my child," smoothly repeating the same thing she had said to Alan. She seemed to like that joke. Prince Alan, when did this happen? Keith gasped, looking at Alan in shock. Alan and Mary were engaged, that much was true. So, inevitably, any child of Mary's must also be Alan's child, assuming the child was actually Mary's, that is. Hey? I mean, what are you saying? Keith, you've got the wrong idea, I haven't done anything, insisted Alan, waving his hands and looking extremely flustered. That's right. She is not Prince Alan's child. She is my and Lady Katarina's daughter. Once again, Mary told the same joke. Though I thought that Keith wouldn't be fooled as easily as Alan, but he froze up in just the same way. But, I mean, you're both women. Could it be? Keith, this is all because I desperately raised you to be unspoiled, fearing that you might become the playboy I knew from the game, meaning that you grew up without various kinds of knowledge. I'm sorry. Two women really can't make a baby. Next to Keith, Sophia's head seemed to be full of odd knowledge. Oh, so members of the same sex can finally have children? Don't tell me there's now medicine that can change one's sex, she burbled, among other such suspicious things. I thought to myself that it might be about time for me to help Sophia revise the genre of books she read. While I thought about this, I unconsciously assumed a far-off expression as I watched over my friends. Jedward, with the same look in his eyes, blurted out to Nicole, "No matter how I look at them, the members of this lineup are just a little simple-minded, wouldn't you say? I'm sure they don't act this way at work, but when it comes to Katarina, they do seem particularly useless." "I suppose Katarina has had a strong influence on them," agreed Nicole dispassionately. "When he said that I'd had a strong influence on my friends, did he mean it in a bad way, or a good way? I also think that you should really caution your sister about the kind of books she reads," Jedward remarked, turning his gaze toward Sophia, who was speaking at length about imaginary methods by which two women could produce children. Strangely, he had arrived at the same opinion as me. Nicole thought for a moment. "I'll take the proper measures." He spoke with a distant look in his eyes. Eventually, after slogging through intense confusion, everyone understood that the little girl was Mary's niece. Around that time, a servant of Clay's Manor came bearing a letter for me. "Oh, it's from Ginger." This letter had been sent by Ginger, a junior of mine at the Academy of Magic. When I graduated, she had taken over the vegetable garden I had raised. Written neatly on the page were the words, "The majority of the vegetables you entrusted to me have reached the time of their harvest. Would you like to harvest them together?" I definitely wanted to take part in harvesting the vegetables from my garden at the academy. And then I'd like to enjoy eating the vegetables that we would harvest, just as I had done in the past. "Let's have a harvest festival," I resolved, before discussing it with everyone gathered around me. Upon sharing the news, everyone else was also enthusiastic. It was something we had done together back when we attended the academy. I sent a positive response to Ginger at once, kicking off a correspondence between us, and once I had sorted out everyone else's availability, we arranged to hold a harvest festival at the Academy of Magic. On the day of the harvest festival, we had all attempted to match our schedules together, so nearly all current and former members of the student council came together to celebrate the festival. I had tended a field from the age of 8, so of course my adoptive brother and friends, who had been helping me ever since then, were very skilled by now, but I was shocked to see how capable Ginger and Frey, current members of the student council, had become. Ginger said that she had some experience growing vegetables at home, but Frey, a dyed-in-the-wool young noblewoman, had apparently never done garden work before I introduced her to it. However, at some point she had become brilliantly dexterous, like a veteran farmer. Remarking on this incredible growth, I called out to Frey, saying, "You really seem used to this now." "I would have to say I'm quite good with my hands," she replied, chuckling. "Well, even so, this is amazing. You're practically a pro gardener now." I wondered how long it had taken me to reach the same level. "A pro gardener, you say?" Tee-hee-hee, Frey laughed, clearly amused, and then added the following, "But I must say, it really is fun working the earth like this. For one reason or another, I find myself coming here every day, so I think I've started to grow used to it." Frey, have you started to find farm work fun?" I asked, so happy to hear Frey, who, however you looked at her, was a picture-perfect noble girl, describe field work as fun, that I couldn't help but lean forward. Frey answered, "Yes, I have. Although I started doing it casually, only thinking of helping Ginger, seeing vegetables planted by my own hand growing steadily makes me very happy, and knowing that the more I work on them, the more fruitful the harvest will be, made it all the more fascinating. Now I find myself coming here perhaps even more than Ginger does." While I was still attending the academy, I had quite a few opportunities to socialize with Ginger and speak with her, and more often than not Frey was standing beside her, but despite that, I don't think I had many opportunities to really speak with Frey herself. Frey seemed to be an ideal young lady, both in her looks and in her conduct, so I had a strong impression that she was only doing field work to help her good friend Ginger. Learning that she had become so obsessed with it herself, and for much the same reason that I had at that, pleased me greatly. I gave Frey an impassioned speech, explaining that the veggies would come out different depending on the day they were harvested on the time of day, even so one needed to look at them carefully to determine what was best for each of the little darlings. Some people might have no interest in this subject, and would react to one of my speeches with exasperation, but Frey listened with her eyes sparkling. "I'm learning so much," she said, listening to my speech with her face breaking into a smile. I felt my cheeks naturally start to loosen as well. After talking to Frey today, my impression of her had changed. I never thought you would listen to me talk about field work so intently. I always figured you were a prim and proper young noblewoman with no interest in such things, I revealed to Frey, my eyes widening slightly. I can see what you mean. I too considered myself a thing that you might call a young noblewoman. Frey. I responded quizzically, not quite understanding what she meant. After smiling, while somehow still looking sad, she went on, "Lady Katarina, I have wanted to thank you for some time now." "Thank me? Did I do something for you, Frey?" I had no idea what she meant. Frey nodded decisively. "Yes. This happened before I started at the academy. I came for a tour of the campus, and while I was walking around aimlessly, I came upon this field. Then I saw you wearing work clothes and tending the crops, Lady Katarina." "Hey, really? Did I meet Frey in this field before she started at the academy?" I racked my memory to try and recall such an event, but I couldn't. Frey giggled quietly to herself while watching me puzzle over this. I think it was a little while before the commencement ceremony. Though I probably seemed quite different then from the way I am now. That's right. I was something like a doll, without emotions. Like a doll without emotions? Looking at Frey as she was now, I simply couldn't imagine that. With that thought on my mind, I continued to work backward through my memories, when suddenly... Ah! That's right, I think it happened around the time that our spring vacation was about to end. While I was digging rows in the earth with Anne, who had accompanied me to the academy, in order to plant potato seeds, a solitary girl appeared in the field, where people seldom came. "Have you remembered?" asked Frey, smiling. Looking squarely at her now, I couldn't immediately imagine that she really was the girl I had met that day. That was how much her mood had changed. These days, Frey was confident, with the light in her eyes that spoke of her strong will, whereas the girl I met back then seemed to have no feelings of her own, her eyes seeming to reflect nothing at all. "I remember now, but you were so different that it's hard to imagine that you are the same person," I admitted. "I'm happy to hear that. It's because of you, Lady Katarina, and another person, that I was able to change," Frey declared, before smiling and looking up at the sky. I, Frey Rendell, had spent my entire life as a doll who could do nothing besides listen to my father, Marquis Rendell. I had always been told, "It is for this purpose that you are alive," so I simply did whatever the Marquis told me to do, and never thought that there was anything strange about that. No, I might have thought that it was strange, once upon a time, but confronted with the Marquis, who would respond to any rebellious behavior with harsh words and violence, perhaps my heart had been rendered numb over time. My mother, one of Marquis Randall's mistresses, was always afraid of him. In the first place, Marquis Randall had obtained her from a noble house of lower status in order to secure a debt, but also because she had a certain amount of magical ability. After I was born, my mother's health was impaired and she could no longer bear children, so she remained in the manor with the sole purpose of caring for me. She waited on me so much like a servant of the house that I sometimes doubted that she even knew that I was her daughter. With a mother who only interacted with me as a servant, and a father who did nothing but issue commands, I was surrounded only by tutors, who drummed all manner of lessons into me. My role was to act so that the Marquis's plans would progress. Ultimately, I was to marry for Marquis Randall's benefit. I was brought up being told that I only existed to be used for that purpose. Even when it was almost time for me to commence my studies at the Academy of Magic, I still thought that this was something that would never change. That is, until I met that person. This took place when I went to the magical ministry with Marquis Randall. The Marquis, who probably wanted to use the presence of a daughter with high magical ability to curry favor with ministry officials, became terribly irritated after finding that his attempt to promote himself had ended in failure. That irritation seemed to be directed toward me, his daughter. After leaving the room where we had met with the officials and walking along the corridor for a while, as soon as it was just the two of us, Marquis Randall glared at me and said, "It's your fault they didn't heed my request. It was your sluggishness, wasn't it? You worthless child." So spoke Marquis Randall, heaping abuse on me. As always, I bowed my head and said, "I am truly sorry." But on this occasion, Marquis Randall's anger would not be assuaged so easily. His hand struck my bowed head from above. I stumbled and collapsed on the corridor floor. "How dare you think that if you only bow your head, you will be so easily forgiven, you laggard." As he berated me, I braced myself, expecting the beating to continue. But curiously, a second blow did not come flying at me. Raising my head gingerly, I saw that a woman had appeared beside Marquis Randall and seized his raised arm. She was a pretty woman with black hair and glasses. Her eyes stared coldly at the Marquis. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" barked Marquis Randall, glaring at the woman. "I should ask you the same question. Just what do you think you're doing to this young woman, here of all places?" The woman's voice was beautiful, but very cold. Her hand still held Marquis Randall's arm in place. After violently shaking his arm free from the woman's grasp, Marquis Randall glared at her and said, "This is my daughter, and I was just in the middle of disciplining her. This is no concern of a slip of a girl like you. Now begone from my sight, at once." Seeing the look of menace he gave the woman, I thought I might start shaking. The woman, however, maintained a cool expression, and rejoined, "I find it curious that you would call hurling insults and committing violence discipline. Also, I am not just some slip of a girl. I am Lorna Smith, a senior official in the magical ministry." Lorna Smith, an official of the magical ministry. I had heard that someone of that name had recently been promoted within the ministry, but seeing what a young girl you are, it's obvious that the ministry has fallen on hard times, spat Marquis Randall, mocking Lorna. "You are the one who has fallen, Marquis Randall. There must be something wrong with your eyes, for you understand nothing. I am a high-ranking member of this ministry. I am deeply acquainted with the very people you sought to curry favor with. Do you take my meaning?" sneered the woman, Lorna Smith, her lips curling up in a taunting smile. Marquis Randall, who had been so aggressive up until that point, suddenly recoiled. Perhaps he had thought that the woman was not aware of his identity. Though he had come to visit the magical ministry with the intention of getting closer to its leaders, he just made a mockery of one of them, leaving him further away from his objective than when he started. Even so, Marquis Randall's pride would surely not permit him to make an apology to a woman far younger than himself. "Curses, I've had enough for today. You can find your own way home," he snarled, leaving me collapsed in the corridor and walking briskly away. I knew not where he was going. He would most likely either take the carriage we had ridden together to the ministry back to Randall Manor, or go into town to vent his frustration. I would now have to return home by myself, but as there were carriages for hire available at the ministry, that would not be a problem. As a matter of fact, I was relieved that, for now, I would not be subjected to any more violence from the ill-tempered Marquis Randall. Still sitting with my hands pressed against the floor, I quietly let out a sigh. "Are you all right?" called a voice to me. At the same time, someone offered me their hand. Standing before me was Lorna Smith, whose eyes had lost their cold demeanor and now peered down at me, full of concern. "Thank you very much," I answered, taking her hand and standing up. Because I had been sitting on the floor, my clothes were dirty, so I brushed the dust off of them. Lorna Smith watched me the whole time. No one would have blamed her if she had left at that point, but for some reason she stayed, looking at me intently. Is something the matter?" I asked. "Is he always like that?" she responded. It was obvious that she was referring to Marquis Randall's deeds from earlier. I should not do anything to bring shame on my family. I should not do anything that would not benefit Marquis Randall. That is what I had been told. To follow what I had been taught, I should have said, "No, not at all." But instead I hesitated, then told her, "Yes. He's always like that." Before I could stop myself, I had said it. I heard Lorna Smith gasp slightly. After a brief spell of silence, she simply replied, "Is that right?" Her voice somehow had a ring of sadness to it. This woman had clearly taken pity on me. As an official in the magical ministry, she had power, but there was nothing she could do about what went on within families. "It's all right. I'm used to it," I added, putting on the bravest face I could for this kind passerby who had taken pity on me. I plastered a fake smile across my face, whereupon Lorna Smith's hand touched my face. To my immense surprise, she used that hand to wipe something from my cheek. Though I had not even realized it myself, tears were streaming down my face. Why? I did not understand the reason for these tears myself. In spite of this, Lorna Smith simply pressed a handkerchief against my cheek, and said, "Don't give up. Keep going, and keep looking forward. If you just hold on a little longer, I'm sure." The last words she whispered were so quiet that I couldn't hear them, but the cheek she had wiped with her handkerchief somehow felt warmer, and my heart felt lighter. After making sure that my tears had stopped flowing, Lorna Smith accompanied me to the magical ministry's exit and arranged for a coach to take me home. I bowed my head over and over again as I thanked her. "Think nothing of it," she said, stroking my head. And so, with the horse-drawn coach swaying, I made my way home to Randall Manor. As expected, Marquis Randall had gone out to vent his frustration, and had still not come home. Apparently he ended up staying out long into the night, before returning home drunk and going straight to bed. The next day, he must have been hungover and feeling unable to get up, or something, because he stayed in his room all day. I felt relieved that he still seemed to be leaving the matter of the magical ministry alone, and would not hit me for it again. But at the same time, another feeling was taking root in my heart, something I had never felt before. None of what I had believed seemed to matter anymore, even though, so far, I had only been granted this life in order to act for the benefit of Marquis Randall. Don't give up. Keep going, and keep looking forward. I ruminated over the words Lorna Smith had said to me that day over and over. But time marched on without me coming any closer to understanding just what I should do. Some time after that, Marquis Randall told me that he was going to the Academy of Magic to introduce himself, and that I was to accompany him. The Academy of Magic, which stood on the same grounds as the Magical Ministry, was also called a training ground for future workers at the Ministry. The connection between them ran very deep. Marquis Randall, who had sought a connection with Ministry leaders, now wondered if he might be able to first become connected at the Academy. Since I, his daughter, was due to be enrolled at the Academy the very next year, he had come under the pretense of making introductions, with the ulterior motive of flattering the faculty. In contrast to the cold dismissal he had received from the officials at the Magical Ministry, the people at the Academy received him with a fair amount of courtesy. I was relieved to think that I would not be subjected to verbal abuse or violence. Then Marquis Randall left me there, saying that he would be going directly to the palace, and commanded me to return home by myself. In the past, I am sure I would have gone straight home, climbing into the coach we had taken there. However, on this occasion I had thoughts of my own. I thought that, since I would soon be commencing my studies at the academy, I would like to have a proper look at the campus. Marquis Randall had only come to greet the faculty to curry favor with them, under the pretense of bringing his daughter to see the academy, but in reality I had not been shown anything. From the day Lorna Smith had spoken those fateful words, I had started to look at what lay in front of me, little by little. As I considered what lay in front of me at that moment, I thought that the academy somehow seemed like a lovely place, and that I wished to see more of it. I decided that I would go and look around the academy of my own volition. I thought that I wouldn't mind if Marquis Randall criticized me for it later. This was in spite of the fact that I had always feared him so much, and had grown up believing that I should always obey him. I wanted to go and look around by myself. Rebuffing even the servants who offered to accompany me, I did just that. My heart pounded from this unprecedented act of independence, as I inspected the academy from top to bottom. Eventually, I came upon something I never would have expected to find. No matter how I looked at it, it simply didn't belong in the Academy of Magic. I could only gape at the vegetable garden filling my field of vision, dumbfounded. "Oh, who are you?" someone called out. As I turned to look at the speaker, I saw a woman wearing farming clothes looking right at me. I'm a newly enrolled student, starting in the next school year." Not wanting to be taken for someone suspicious and ending up in trouble, I quickly explained myself. "Oh, then you'll be in the year below me," said the woman in work clothes, smiling. From her attire, I had been sure that she was one of the academy's gardeners, but incredibly, she actually seemed to be a student. In that case, was she the daughter of a noble house? Well, no noble woman would be seen tilling a field, nor would she be dressed like that. That's right, I was sure that I had heard that in the year above mine, there was a commoner who could use light magic. Perhaps she was that commoner? Might you be the wielder of light that I have heard rumors about?" I inquired. The woman smiled, and replied, "No, but she's a friend of mine. I'm Katarina Clays. I hope we'll get along." Katarina Clays. That was a name that I had heard before. The only daughter of the house of Duke Clays, and the fiancée of the third-born prince. So she was a noble woman of higher status than me. Why would such a person be doing this? Might I ask what you're doing here? Under normal circumstances, I would feel obliged to respond to an introduction from someone of nobler birth than me by introducing myself, but my shock and doubt won out over this feeling of obligation, so I could not help but wonder. Though I knew my attitude was not suitably respectful for a young noblewoman, Katarina Clays did not seem bothered in the slightest. "Sure, I was just digging rows to plant potato seeds," she replied, though I cannot say I really understood. In other words, she had been doing the sort of field work that a farmer might do. Perhaps that was all I needed to know. But why would a woman of such noble standing be working in a field? Perhaps some manner of grave misfortune had befallen her family? Why would you do such a thing? I was surprised at the extent to which my mouth kept moving. Usually I would never speak to a new acquaintance in such a manner. "Hey? Because it's my hobby." This reply was so unexpected that I couldn't help but freeze up. "Hobby?" I murmured, simply parroting what she had said. Katarina Clays grinned and declared, "That's right, a hobby. I'm only doing it because I want to." She had answered me so casually that I couldn't help feeling silly for thinking that some grave misfortune had befallen her. And she seemed to glow with a sense of freedom as she declared that she was only doing field work because she wanted to. Almost enchanted by that glow, I could not help but follow with another question. Somebody told me that I shouldn't give up, but should keep looking forward. But what am I supposed to do next? Can you tell me?" Ever since I had received those words, I had felt hazy, almost as if a curtain had been drawn around my mind. Not knowing what to do, I had wanted to talk to someone, but had no one I could ask. So I ended up asking this stranger I had only just met. I felt that this person, who glowed with a sense of overflowing freedom, would have an answer for me. Upon hearing my question, Katarina Claes gave me a puzzled look. That wasn't surprising. Anyone would consider it an imposition to be asked such a profound question by a junior classmate they had only just met. How insolent of me to even ask. Please excuse me. I shouldn't have interrupted you. I was overcome by a strong sense of shame, and was about to leave when Katarina Claes opened her mouth again. I guess you should keep moving on. Hey. If you've decided not to give up, and keep looking ahead, I think the next thing to do would be to move forward, explained Katarina Claes, grinning just like she had earlier. It took me a while to respond. Move forward. Yep. Put one foot in front of you like this and step forward, said Katarina Claes, who put one foot forward before taking a big leap in the same direction. The sight of this woman in work clothes jumping through a garden, with the light of the sun pouring down from above, might have looked comical to an outside observer. But to me, she looked divine, almost like a sculpture of a god. I experienced a curious feeling, as if the curtain that had shrouded my mind up until now had been torn away in an instant. Just move ahead. Put one foot forward. That was it. I had known what I wanted to do after all. I knew that life couldn't go on this way forever. I felt as if the world had opened up to me all at once. My world, which had been grey, now had color. Lorna Smith's words, which I hadn't fully understood at the time, now saturated my mind. With what Lorna Smith I mean, Lady Lorna Smith had given me, followed by my encounter with Lady Katarina Claes, I was able to discard my old self, the marionette I used to be. I was able to become a new person. My heart, which had been closed, was now open. At the same time, the fear and loyalty I had felt toward Marquis Randall, which I had been so sure were absolute, also started to fade away. Thank you so much. I tried to articulate the gratitude I felt toward the person who had pulled away the heavy shroud I had placed over my own heart. Hey, for what? A puzzled look came over Lady Katarina Claes's face. How should I put it? She seemed to be a straightforward person. I think I would like to take a few steps forward before I start at the academy, I admitted, putting words to my own resolve. I imagined that my words would sound incomprehensible to Lady Katarina Claes. But once again, she smiled. Go for it. I will. I then said a proper goodbye to Lady Katarina Claes, looked squarely ahead, and took my first step forward. Though later, once I had gotten in the horse-drawn coach that would take me home, I remembered that I had never given her my own name, and started to fret. But in the end, the next time I met Lady Katarina, it turned out that she had forgotten the whole conversation. From that day on, I lived not as a doll who knew only how to nod, but started to speak my own opinions as Frey Randall. I decided to voice the feelings I had kept pushed down inside my heart for all this time. Perhaps someone had said something to him, or else it was because I was soon to enter the academy, but for his part, ever since that day that Lady Lorna Smith had stopped him from hitting me, Marquis Randall no longer beat me. However, after I suddenly became defiant toward him, he did still shout abuse at me, but I was starting to understand that verbal abuse from Marquis Randall, whom I had feared so much in the past, could simply be ignored and allowed to pass. People can change if they try. I became almost unrecognizable compared to the person I had been a year earlier. And as a result of that change, I was able to make close friends, the likes of which I had never had before. For one, there was Ginger, who adored Lady Katarina, to whom I owed about as much thanks as I owed Lady Lorna Smith. Though Ginger's social status and life experiences were very different from my own, we began to talk because of our mutual affection for Lady Katarina. That being said, Ginger was not the most forthcoming person, and would not quite admit that she was so fond of Lady Katarina. Ginger was a serious and industrious sort, and not someone who would take part in the sort of flattery and brown-nosing typical of noble women, so she probably would not have had much to do with me if I was still the kind of person I had been before entering the academy. As it was, though, I found being around Ginger very comfortable. There was no need for us to question each other's true intentions, or engage in flattery. She provided a new place for me to belong. Frey? What's wrong? While I had been standing there absent-mindedly as I recalled one thing after another, Lady Katarina looked at me in concern. Ah, nothing, excuse me. A lot of memories just came back to me. Really? Are you okay? Though Lady Katarina was thoroughly dense when it came to the subject of romance, she could still be surprisingly sharp when it came to people's feelings, and she must have realized that I had recalled something disagreeable from my past. I'm all right. Thanks to you, Lady Katarina, I feel like I was born again, so my next goal is to be like Lady Lorna Smith. I announced resolutely. Well, Lady Lorna certainly is good at her job, but, Lady Katarina's face was troubled. As she was currently working in the same department as Lady Lorna Smith, there must have been things that she knew that I did not. I envied her. I'll work hard so that, next year, I can be assigned to your department, Lady Katarina. Lady Katarina blinked. Hey, you'll be coming to work in our department? That's a little, once again, her face somehow looked troubled. I stared back at her, thinking that this was an odd reaction, when Ginger, wearing work clothes, appeared a short distance away. Lady Katarina. You know, I am also scheduled to start work at the Magical Ministry, she revealed, doing her best to promote herself. Well, actually, she might not have been doing so consciously. Really? So Frey and Ginger are coming to join us? Then I'm really looking forward to the next year of work. Lady Katarina grinned. But then she remarked, I'll just have to hang in there for about 6 more months. I could have sworn that she said this with a solemn expression, but in the blink of an eye her usual smile had returned, so perhaps it was only my imagination. We then went on to enjoy our time together with Lady Katarina and the other former members of the student council. Incidentally, the most effective garden worker in attendance proved to be Lady Katarina's personal maid, Anne. She did roughly twice the work of any other person, but still harvested her vegetables gracefully. I guess having assisted Lady Katarina with her gardening ever since her lady was a small child, she had become more skilled than anyone else. Seeing her look at Lady Katarina with the most gentle look in her eyes, I could tell that she was very fond of her charge. I imagined that I always looked at Lady Katarina with the same look in my eyes. Lady Katarina, I am truly glad to have met you. Chapter 2, Everyday Life at the Magical Ministry. Having heard during the harvest how passionate Frey and Ginger were about the Magical Ministry, and having had a party afterward to thank everyone for their hard work, I boarded a horse-drawn coach and headed home. Though I had known that Frey looked up to Lorna, I was surprised to hear that she wanted to work in the same department. But I suppose that was to be expected. The same department as Lorna. In other words, the magical tool laboratory, where I was currently working. So that brilliant and adorable Frey will be coming to work in our department. Lorna Smith, the department chief of the magical tool laboratory, was herself so brilliant that she had joined the leadership of the magical ministry at an unusually young age, but she also had quite a strong personality. A total nerd for magic, she had a tendency to neglect anything not strictly related to the magic which drew her attention so powerfully. Working in the same department, I had become familiar with that aspect of her personality, and I also had to do a lot more work to make up for her neglect. Even so, when push came to shove, she was a boss who could always be relied on to protect her subordinates. Besides, Lorna was not the only peculiar person in the department. There was a cross-dressing muscular macho man, someone with far too little presence and a predisposition to getting lost, an extreme narcissist who had modified his uniform to be all sparkly, someone who could only make conversation by speaking through a plush toy, someone who wore a tank top all year round, and a mad scientist type who always wore a lab coat. We also had some flawed pretty boys with tragic backstories, like the previous student council president, and a former member of a gang of kidnappers from a foreign kingdom. How could I describe the magical tool laboratory, other than as a den of oddballs? That must have been one of the reasons that it was apparently the department most new employees least wanted to join. The department was full of strange people, but they were also all good people, so it was a great place to work, but I wondered if Frey would be able to cope with so many intense personalities. But, well, given how talented Frey was, I had a feeling that there was a high probability of her being scooped up by the Magic and Magical Powers Research Department, where Maria worked alongside her colleague Dewey. With Cyrus at its head, the members of that department were known as the star players of the Ministry. As the department's staff were both very popular and very capable, all the promising candidates seemed to end up there. Incidentally, both Dewey and Cyrus were romanceable characters in Fortune Lover 2, and both of them had already fallen head over heels for Maria. In the game, they were fated to be opposed by Katarina, but under the present circumstances, I counted Dewey as a good friend who had joined the Ministry at the same time as me, and Cyrus had become my farming buddy, working with me on my secret vegetable garden. But putting all that to one side, I wondered whether or not Frey would come to our department. If someone had a strong enough desire to work in a particular department, would they be able to go and work there? Never having asked anyone about that, I really didn't know. Next time I go to work, I'll be sure to ask, for Frey's sake. Having seen how brightly Frey's eyes shone when she talked about the Ministry, I was looking forward to the day when she could work there successfully. I just had to see that day come with my own eyes. To that end, I had to hang in there, and avoid encountering my doom for 6 more months. I resolved to do just that, and clenched my fists tightly. Without missing a beat, Keith, who was seated opposite me in the carriage, asked in a low voice, "Big sister, what are you looking so determined about? Please don't stick your nose into anything troublesome again." My adoptive brother, who I had long considered my good luck charm, as he performed the role of picking up after me, had grown into a sexy, handsome young man, but underneath that appearance he was actually a total mom. I wasn't going to do anything like that. I was just feeling eager about working hard at my job again, starting tomorrow, I refuted Keith, pursing my lips. After considering this for a moment, Keith grumbled, "I'm glad to hear that, if that's all it was, but seriously, please don't stick your nose into anything weird again. Especially right now. We already have our share of difficulties." Difficulties? Yet. I will elaborate, since Father told me that I ought to mention this to you. The truth is that recently, some families have persisted in asking the following question of the House of Duke Clays: "Your daughter's engagement to Prince Jedward has continued for some time now, but does she actually intend to marry him at some point?" It has been something of a nuisance to deal with them. Are you talking about relatives of the Clays family? I had already heard Father mention that our relatives had been asking that same question. No, if it was only our relatives, then it wouldn't be too much of a problem, but this time we've been scrutinized by quite a powerful family. A powerful family? The House of Marquis Randall. Marquis Randall, you say? Isn't that Lady Susanna's family? I suppose it is. Then what could they possibly hope to achieve by asking about my marriage? Surely the marriage of Lady Susanna and Prince Geoffrey should come first. Geoffrey, the firstborn prince, and Susanna, his fiancée, had been engaged for longer than Jedward and I, and would soon be past what was considered marriageable age. However one looked at it, surely it was more important for them to hurry up. You're absolutely right, but there are rumors saying that Lady Susanna and Marquis Randall are not on very good terms. Hey, really? Yet. Although the Randall family has nominally claimed the position of leading supporters of Prince Geoffrey, in reality their relationship doesn't appear very strong. And although the Randall family denies it, I have even heard that Lady Susanna no longer lives as part of the household, but has rented a place of residence somewhere else. Is that right? I had not expected to hear that Lady Susanna, who always seemed so cheerful, did not get along with her family. Given these circumstances, Marquis Randall can't push too hard when it comes to Prince Geoffrey and Lady Susanna. So two people who should have been married long ago are still only engaged, and the question of royal succession is still undecided. I'm sure the Marquis has a lot to worry about. We think that's why he's come to sound us out, but in any case, Marquis Randall is someone with a strong desire for power, so we don't know what he might attempt if he becomes impatient. I don't tend to think that he'll try doing anything to you personally, big sister, but I want you to be more careful about what's going on around you. I had to ponder this for a moment. I see. Understood. I thought things were already bad enough, at a time when a bad end from Fortune Lover 2 might be in my future, and I felt quite despondent at having to worry about some unknown nobleman on top of that. The thought of how gloomy Lady Susanna's family history was didn't help. Seeing how depressed I looked, Keith spoke up again. When we get home, there are some sweets I prepared for you. I'll make some tea too, so let's eat them together. Keith really knew how to handle me. I suppose eating tasty sweets was usually enough to cheer me up. And so it was that, almost as if I was dancing in the palm of Keith's hand, sweets were all it took to put me back in high spirits. Given that pleasant feeling, combined with the fatigue from our lively work at the Harvest Festival, I slept soundly that night. Returning to the magical ministry at the end of my vacation, I found it was business as usual. As always, I headed to the magical tool laboratory. There I was sure I'd find Sora preparing the office for the day's work, all by himself. Sora was my colleague who had joined the ministry around the same time as me, and he always arrived at the office a little earlier than me. "Good morning," I said as I opened the door. "Morning." Sora did indeed return my greeting, but standing next to him was a man I did not recognize. What's more, the man had a rough air about him. His deep-set eyes under still eyebrows, and muscular body made me sure that a certain type of lady would squeal at the sight of him. As I was wondering just which department this man belonged to, he spoke up. "Oh my, good morning," the man exclaimed, waving to me. Both this gesture and this voice were very familiar to me. Laura. I sputtered, opening my eyes wide. Correct, she said, holding up 2 fingers in a cute peace sign. The gesture clashed strongly with her present appearance. This was my senior colleague from this very department, who was officially named Guy Henderson, but who called herself Laura. No doubt about it. Why are you dressed like that? What happened to your regular clothes and makeup? When I thought of Laura, I imagined someone with a macho, masculine body, but wearing cute, frilly women's clothes, and with such perfectly applied makeup that one could only guess as to what her face might look like without it. You're telling me she's only cool and macho now? What's going on? Because of something work-related, I have to wear a disguise. I'm following Lady Larna's example. A disguise? You mean what you're wearing now? If I had to pick one or the other, I would say her normal appearance seemed more like a disguise. To be completely honest, this look felt like a much better fit. That's right. I look like someone who might be doing hard physical labor in the neighborhood, don't I? Yes. That's exactly how you look. More to the point, is that how you look without makeup. Never having seen her without makeup before, I didn't know how she looked without it. Oh, not a chance. A lady does not reveal her unmade face so easily. Tee-hee-hee, Laura laughed pointedly. You're a lady then, are you? Sora quickly blurted out, after a glance at Laura. Oh, I'm a lady however you look at me, am I not? Laura, who from every angle appeared to be a macho man heading home from a morning of physical labor, did a twirl. Her typical appearance was one thing, but with her current appearance, however I looked at her, she did not look like a lady. Sora and I could only smile ambiguously. Getting back on topic, are you going to be working in that get-up today? I asked Laura. That's right. Once my partner is finished preparing, we'll be heading out, she answered with a smile. By your partner, do you mean Mr. Hart? The brawny Laura was often seen together with Nathan Hart, who was best characterized as lanky, so I thought that might be the case this time. No. Where we're going today, I can't really be seen dragging a young man around on a leash, so Nathan will be staying here, Laura replied firmly in the negative. A leash. True, though Nathan Hart was talented, he had a terrible tendency to get lost, even still having trouble finding his way around the magical ministry. When he went outside the office for work, he had to be accompanied by a partner who would hold a leash harnessed to him. Considering that Laura was also in disguise, there must be some special circumstances around today's work site. Ah! To think that someone as beautiful as me must wear such plain attire. Truly, this is uncomfortable. The door slammed open, and a man entered the office speaking these words. His appearance mirrored Laura's disguise, a young man dressed for physical labor. Though of course, he was less brawny than Laura. Are you Mr. Cornish? Neither his face nor his clothes had many distinguishing features, but his voice was unmistakably that of Nix Cornish. Yeah, you are correct, newbie. As expected, even in this plain attire, my aura of beauty cannot be extinguished, he declared while embracing himself tightly. This really was the Mr. Cornish I was used to. He was a severe narcissist, and very much in love with his own beauty. His clothes were normally very flashy, and he clearly devoted a lot of time to his skincare and makeup, spending any spare moment he might find in front of a mirror. To think that he was now in plain clothes, with a plain face. Though I also felt the same way about Laura's current appearance, seeing Mr. Cornish like this was really a rare treat. So by partner, you meant Mr. Cornish, deduced Sora. Sighing slightly, Laura confirmed, yes, I did. He might not get lost, but it looks like keeping his annoying mouth shut will be hard work. After that, Mr. Cornish spouted a number of things, including, it's an act of sacrilege upon this world for me to be dressed like this, but Laura simply dragged him with her as they headed out to work. Because Mr. Cornish had carried on for so long, by the time they had left, several of my other more senior colleagues had already arrived. Among them was Lisa Norman, said to be a childhood friend of Mr. Cornish, who watched him leave with a cold look in her eyes. I only hope that empty-headed man doesn't cause any problems, like he always does. The adorable hand puppet Miss Norman was holding spoke ill of Mr. Cornish in a deep voice. These were Miss Norman's words, of course. Incidentally, though today Mr. Cornish had been paired with Laura, usually he worked together with Miss Norman. Is it the case that Mr. Cornish is always causing some kind of problem? I asked without thinking, prompted by the negative aura hanging over Miss Norman. Both she and her puppet drew much closer to me. Yes, and I've had quite enough of him. He's always been that way, ever since we were children. He's always been an idiot as well. He does at least have a pretty face, but he is desperately lacking in the brains department. Catastrophically so. Back at the academy, I always had to assist him with his studies. At least he managed to graduate in the end. The hand puppet, Miss Norman, said all of this without taking a breath. The force behind her words made it abundantly clear how much difficulty she had suffered. But as usual, the expression on her face changed very little. Just how long have you two known each other? I had heard that they had known each other for quite a long time. Miss Norman's brow furrowed when I asked this question. Finally, her expression changed. Miss Norman hesitated before replying. We've been around each other longer than I can remember. Our mothers, who are related, were always close, and became closer still once they had children of the same age. After that, they would spend nearly every day together in each other's homes, taking their children with them. As she spoke through her hand puppet, she had a somewhat far-off look in her eyes. It was my first time seeing Miss Norman, who always seemed emotionless and indifferent, become so expressive. But I have to say that I felt a certain kind of respect for her, managing to continue speaking through her puppet without moving her mouth, even under such circumstances. I'm amazed that you've known each other ever since you were little. Did Mr. Cornish's strong love of himself also begin when you were little? I asked this question of Miss Norman casually, but she looked startled and stumbled over her words. I'm pretty sure, she stammered. Realizing that I had asked a question I shouldn't have, I became flustered, and thought I would say, actually, never mind, but before I could, Miss Norman looked directly at me and continued. He only became that way after this happened to me, she said, pulling down the collar of her turtleneck slightly. Miss Norman always wore a turtleneck under her ministry uniform. Although I had been dimly aware of the fact, the majority of the workers in this department would wear anything but their uniforms, be it a gothic Lolita dress, a tank top, or a lab coat. They flouted the dress code so freely that I had never paid much attention to Miss Norman's outfit before now. With the collar of her turtleneck lowered, I could see that Miss Norman wore something like a narrow choker around her neck. Underneath that was a large scar. I gasped in shock. In her usual dispassionate voice, Miss Norman's hand puppet said, I ended up this way in an accident when I was small. From that day on, I was unable to speak unassisted. After a while, this magical tool was created for me, producing a voice for me from the vibrations in my throat. After saying this, the hand puppet indicated itself. That little cutie was a magical tool the whole time. I was shocked. I had been entirely convinced that it was a mere hand puppet, and that she had made it talk through ventriloquism. Miss Norman smiled slightly, and said, surprising, isn't it? Yes. So that puppet is constructed so that a voice comes out when you flap its mouth, is it? I looked at the hand puppet Miss Norman held with renewed scrutiny. Was it really a magical tool? No matter how I looked at it, it appeared to be a mere hand puppet. But in the past, I had thought that the bear Larna had made to look for missing people seemed to be nothing more than a plush toy. Could this be the same sort of thing? The voice will emerge regardless of whether or not I flap its mouth. This device around my neck reads the vibrations in my throat and produces the sound, so I just flap its mouth to match my speech. It's cuter that way. Hey, is that right? Is it really cuter to make its mouth flap? Well, I suppose if one wanted to act like it was talking, that would maybe be better? I just wasn't sure. This little cutie was given to me by that idiot Nix back when I was still moping around after losing my voice, so I had it made into a magical tool that could speak for me. I was used to seeing Miss Norman look at Mr. Cornish coldly, but at this moment, while speaking about him, her expression was really gentle and full of fondness. And so I was able to speak again through this little cutie, but the fact that my voice came out of a puppet resulted in me getting odd looks from the people around me. Of course that meant I didn't much feel like going outside. One day, Nix suddenly came to me dressed in those sparkly clothes he always wears. As if recalling that moment, Miss Norman smiled slightly. He said, "You will serve as a foil for me, the coolest guy in the world. Now, come with me." He dragged me out of my room, and we went straight into town. As you might expect, Nix then spoke loudly of his own beauty, leaving everyone in town speechless. He was branded as a weirdo of the highest order. And people started to tell me that, compared to Nix, that abnormal narcissist, the fact that I spoke through a hand puppet wasn't such a big deal. Having heard all this, dim as I was, I understood. Mr. Cornish became that way. Mr. Cornish became that way for your sake, didn't he, Miss Norman? I murmured. Apparently this was correct. The corners of Miss Norman's mouth turned up slightly, and she nodded. I suppose he did. It was an idiotic strategy that an idiot racked his brains to come up with. His plan was to become so weird that all the people staring at me would stare at him instead. Well, his plan succeeded. Yep. This tale of love, of someone I had thought was just a weirdo actually doing it all out of kindness, slowly started to make sense to me. However. But he is an idiot, so once he started acting that way, it looks like he really did become a narcissist. Nowadays, he's just an oddball. Nuhu, just when the story was getting good, you had to ruin it with that final line. Though the truth is, unlike in the old days, this magical tool has since been miniaturized. It can be made much smaller than this puppet, and if placed around my neck in the same place this choker is now, it could make me look like I was really speaking by myself, revealed Miss Norman, touching the scar around her neck. But this little cutie was a precious gift from that idiot, and I've used it for so many years that I've grown attached to it, so I haven't replaced it. She then continued, in a quiet voice, besides, he ended up that way because of me. I can't bring myself to escape oddball status and leave him all alone like that. She smiled. It was a very gentle smile. Finally, while pressing her index finger against her lips, Miss Norman requested, "Please keep what I just said a secret from that idiot." Such were the unseen circumstances between these two senior colleagues, who had not appeared close at all from the outside. Though I had only ever thought of my colleagues in the magical tool laboratory as a gathering of oddballs, perhaps everyone there was dealing with their own various problems. That was the thought that crossed my mind. Finally it was time for the day's work to start, and everyone got to it. Today I was scheduled to help a bit with delivering mail before having my dark magic practice, followed by my work decoding the Dark Covenant. The truth was that I had been told that I didn't need to go out of my way to help with deliveries, but I argued that if I just sat in a chair every day, my body would grow weak, so I was allowed to take part. In today's magical tool laboratory, Sora and Mr. Tank Top had been put in charge of transporting deliveries. Mr. Tank Top always wore a tank top, on cold days and on hot days alike. Incidentally, I had never seen him wear his actual uniform. As a result, people visiting from other departments often mistook him for a carpenter or a gardener. "All right. Let's work hard again today," cried Mr. Tank Top, pumping his fist in the air. As I watched him out of the corner of my eye, I decided to try asking Sora the question that had been on my mind. Sora, do you know if there's some deep reason why Mr. Tank Top always wears a tank top?" Asking because you were just speaking with Miss Norman. It seemed that Sora had immediately discerned why I had asked such a question. Moreover, judging from how he said it. "Hey? Sora, did you know?" I asked, shocked. Yet, though Miss Norman does hide her scar, she hasn't really hidden the circumstances surrounding it. Probably just about everyone perceptive in the department already knows, Sora answered smoothly. "Is that so?" Not being particularly perceptive myself, I hadn't known. Still, I don't think she's spoken about it in detail to many people before. She must trust you with such things. "Hey, really? I mean, she trusts me. Yet, I think probably most of the people in our department trust you." "Really? Yet, since your personality is so straightforward, even to a fault. Are you praising me, or insulting me?" "Well, who can say?" Sora replied with a grin. This was his usual joke. While I was trying to come up with a retort, we heard another voice. "Hey there, newbies. I'm about to load the cargo." Mr. Tank Top called out to us, and our conversation ended. While grunting from the exertion, we loaded box after box onto the magical tool we used to carry goods. Today, as usual, there were a lot of deliveries to be made to each department in the ministry. Once the packages had all been loaded, Sora operated the magical tool. I wasn't especially good at driving the tool we used to transport goods, but Sora, dexterous as he was, operated it incredibly well. Incidentally, for some reason, there were a number of boxes that Mr. Tank Top had not loaded onto the tool, and was instead carrying by hand. "Aren't you going to load those?" I asked. "Carrying them this way will help train my muscles, so I don't mind," he replied, very much in character. Looks like Mr. Tank Top doesn't have any worries. Well, but Mr. Cornish and Miss Norman, who I thought were nothing but oddballs, did have their own profound circumstances. There might be some profound reason why Mr. Tank Top can't wear anything other than a tank top. If that was in fact the case, it would be rude to keep calling him Mr. Tank Top. I decided to ask Mr. Tank Top himself, who was grunting while carrying his boxes at shoulder height. Is there some kind of reason why you are always wearing a tank top? I asked this with the intention of immediately aborting my inquiry if his attitude told me not to ask any more questions. However, Mr. Tank Top casually answered, "Yeah, there's a really good reason." So there is one after all. To think that even Mr. Tank Top's tank top has a profound reason behind it. You really can't understand a person if you hardly interact with them. I reflected on my past behavior, and privately resolved that I would try not to call him by that nickname in the future, but then he told me what his reason was. Yes. I wear this tank top so I'm always able to see my muscles. Awa. I couldn't stop a strange sound escaping my lips. Far from being unexpected, this was exactly the reason I had expected. If I put clothes on, I wouldn't be able to see my magnificent muscles, would I? If that happened, I'd lose my motivation to keep on training. Therefore I wear this tank top so I can check out my muscles at any given moment. Mr. Tank Top thrust out his chest as he stated this, seeming pleased with himself. I thought to myself that the nickname Mr. Tank Top would be good enough from now on, after all. You can't see the muscles in your legs with those pants on. Are you fine with that? Hang on, Sora. What do you think you're doing asking such a pointless question, with that faint smile on your face? Well, in the early days I did wear short pants, which left my thighs clearly visible, but my boss at the time told me off, saying that an outfit like that wasn't appropriate in the workplace, so I had no choice but to wear full-length pants instead. Short pants that left the thighs visible. In my past life, it was mainly girls who had worn those. We called them shorts. Incidentally, I had not yet seen anyone wear them in this life. A tank top on top and short pants on the bottom. Of course you would get told off for that though, come to think of it, he is still allowed to wear a tank top. At first, I refused, but my boss was dead set on persuading me, and in the end, I was told to make a choice, either my top or my pants would have to change. That was a tough choice. For 3 days I couldn't sleep at night, agonizing over the decision. But in the end, considering that I would usually be more likely to look at my arms, I tearfully chose to wear pants. Mr. Tank Top recounted all this wistfully, as if it was supposed to be a touching story. Wait, what are you talking about? The only thing I could conclude from this story is that things were much harder for his boss. That being said, if he hadn't chosen to keep what he wore on top back then, but instead what he wore down below, then he would have ended up becoming Mr. Shorts. Wearing skin-tight shorts over muscly legs, and showing them off every day, saying, "What do you think? Nice muscles, right?" Yes, it really is a relief that he chose his tank top. So now I have no choice but to hide my legs, but when I'm at home I always take my pants off to train, so I have strong muscles there too. Want to take a look? Asked Mr. Tank Top with a smile, his hands moving to the waistband of his pants. I'm fine, thank you. I declined, interrupting him somewhat. What are you thinking, sir, pulling your pants down in the middle of a corridor at the magical ministry? I see. If you ever feel like looking at them, just let me know. Ha ha ha. With that utterance, Mr. Tank Top lifted the boxes he was carrying even higher. I suppose he wanted to put more of a strain on his muscles. As I watched Mr. Tank Top walk away, I blurted out, I guess not everyone has such a profound reason for their quirks. Sora overheard me and responded with a grin, what do you mean? He was faced with a profound dilemma whether to lose his tank top or his shorts, wasn't he? Judging from the grin on Sora's face, he was pleased with the success of some mischief on his part. Could it be that you were aware of Mr. Tank Top's circumstances this whole time, Sora? I ventured to ask. Yeah, I had a vague idea. I mean, he's always posing in front of the mirror in our dormitory. And if you're really unlucky, he'll grab hold of you and brag about his muscles, so I figured that he probably just liked his body and wanted to show it off, Sora replied smoothly. Hey. Then there was no need for me to ask him, was there? You left me to ask an unnecessary question, and listen to details about his past that I did not want to know about, like the fact that he used to wear short pants. Sora smiled wryly before responding to my complaint. Not really. Even I didn't know about the short pants. Mr. Tank Top used to wear shorts with his tank top. Out of everything I've learned recently, that has to be the most pointless piece of information. Even so, you know a lot about our more senior colleagues, don't you? Is that simply because you joined the ministry just a bit earlier than me? No, that alone wouldn't make such a big difference. There's the fact that you are simply kind of dim, but there's also the fact that I live in the magical ministry's dormitory, so I guess it's easier for me to learn about our senior colleagues who also live there. I see, so you live in the ministry dormitory. Do all of our seniors live there as well? As I commuted to work from home by horse-drawn carriage, I didn't know much about the dormitory. Well, many do. As it's on ministry grounds, living there makes it easy to get to work, though I hear that there are also quite a few workers who rent homes near the castle. Workers like you, who commute from their manor homes, are in the minority. Is that so? I suppose living closer to the ministry would make it easier to commute to work. I do admire people who work and live by themselves, but my family is pretty overprotective, so they probably won't let me do that. By the way, who else lives in the dormitory building? It's a big building, so it's not as if I can keep track of everyone who lives there, but from our department there's Mr. Wolt, Mr. Cornish, and Miss Norman. Oh. Apparently, Mr. Tank Top and Mr. Labcoat lived there too. There were quite a lot of our senior colleagues living there, surprisingly. According to Sora, the dormitory also provided meals, so life there was extremely convenient. Dormitory life sounds kind of lovely. Yeah, though since the building is on ministry grounds, if you're not careful, you may get called into work whenever they're short-handed. That part is kind of a pain. Also, because of how many people live there, there are a lot of rooms, so the floor plan is pretty complicated. So I think it would be pretty difficult for someone like Mr. Hart to live there. Ah, you mean he'd get lost? Yeah. For that reason, I'm pretty sure he rents a house by the nearest road into town, so he can walk to the ministry in a straight line. Why a place in town? Can he really make it home by himself? Mr. Hart was known for his extremely poor sense of direction. It was said that, if he was left to walk by himself for just 3 seconds, he would get lost. On top of that, he had quite a subdued presence, so it was very difficult to find him when he did go missing. Apparently, the magical tool laboratory developed a tool to help him make his way to and from work. Wow, there are tools as useful as that? Wait, what? But in that case, Mr. Hart should never get lost, should he? Well, no. It sounds like it really only allows him to travel between his home and his office here, and it's not as if it does anything amazing, like teleport him through space. Apparently all the tool does is project something like a string that only the user can see. Ah, so that's how it works. To be honest, I had imagined that it would be something closer to the door-like secret device used by a certain robot I remembered from my past life, and I was a little disappointed. And the thought of Mr. Hart desperately following a string in order to get to and from work left me feeling a little bit sad. Ah, that's right, Laura doesn't live in the dormitory building either, does she? I guess not. Since she doesn't live there, I suppose she either rents a house in town, or commutes from her family home. You don't know which? Well, despite her manner, she's actually surprisingly secretive. We can't ever see her without makeup, after all. Ah, that's right. Oh, I guess I really don't know anything about Laura herself. Laura was a bright and interesting person, so when we did meet, we always had a lot to talk about, and I had felt like I understood her true character, but now that I really thought about it, it had all been girl talk about cosmetics, clothes, or whatever sweet shop was in vogue at the time. I had never heard Laura talk about herself. There was only one thing I had heard about her. Speaking of Laura, I heard that she possesses strong magical ability, but that she entered the ministry via the general examination. I wonder if there's some reason for that. Anyone born with magical aptitude in sorcery would be enrolled at the Academy of Magic as soon as they turned 15. If they then achieved high marks, or displayed strong magical ability, they would typically be recommended to join the ministry. The general examination was taken by talented individuals who had not been enrolled in the academy. Anyone who passed would be offered employment at the magical ministry. In short, if you were not very clever, you would not pass that test. Dewey and Mr. Hart were just that clever, so they were able to join the ministry despite coming from non-magical families. But Laura did have magical aptitude. And it was supposed to be particularly strong at that. People with weak magic did occasionally emerge from outside of sorcery. Sora was one such person, but it was accepted that people with strong magic never appeared outside of sorcery. Considering all this, as Laura was from sorcery and had attended the Academy of Magic, I would have expected her to have joined the ministry by recommendation. There was surely no need for her to go to the trouble of taking such a difficult exam. I guess you're right, Sora replied. She must have her own circumstances as well. But she gives me the impression that she really doesn't want anyone sticking their nose into her business. Oh, is that so? You might not realize this yourself, but you're quite good at skirting around subjects like where people come from, or their family circumstances. So good, in fact, that you might not be able to tell how they feel about those subjects. Can you tell, Sora? Yet. Because of my previous line of work, gathering such information is still a habit of mine. I overhear all sorts of things, and make observations. Now that he mentioned it, I recalled that, before coming to work here, Sora had traveled to all kinds of places, and had even handled some dangerous jobs. Sora, you're amazing. I feel like I wouldn't be able to hide anything from you. I mean, whatever you're thinking is usually clearly written on your face, so I don't think I'm the only person you'd have trouble hiding things from. Hey, is it that obvious? Without thinking, I placed both hands on my cheeks. Plain as day. You're kidding. As obvious as that. During our conversation, we arrived at the first place where we needed to make a delivery. Right, let's get to it, newbies. Mr. Tank Top spoke up cheerfully, and took the initiative by picking up the heaviest item we were carrying. In the past I had thought he was being kind when he did that, but having heard him talk about his muscles earlier, now I understood that he just wanted to get some weight training out of this job. Perhaps that was also the reason that he tended to volunteer to deliver the mail in the first place. Because we had 3 people working on delivering goods, we finished quite quickly. Mr. Tank Top looked ready to throw himself into the next job involving physical labor. When I asked Mr. Tank Top whether he had joined the ministry by recommendation or by taking the examination, as expected, he told me it had been by recommendation. His magic was strong, but apparently his grades had been so-so. That was pretty much what I had assumed. Leaving behind the thoroughly predictable Mr. Tank Top, Sora and I headed back to the magical tool laboratory to resume our own individual tasks. Incidentally, I had my regular training in dark magic from my tutor, Raphael. When we got back to the department, we found Larna briskly issuing instructions. We had seldom seen her like that in the past, as Raphael, her right hand in this department, filled in for her. But since he had been roped into tutoring me in dark magic, she had recently started to do her job properly. Though I do think that she should have been doing her job properly before this change in circumstances. Raphael was nowhere to be seen in the department. I was told that he had already left to prepare the room we had borrowed to conduct my dark magic training, so I decided to make my own preparations and head there myself. As soon as I was ready, I thought, well, time to get going, and was about to open the door leading out of the department, when a voice called out to me. Wait a minute, it looks like Nathan needs to go to another department, so take him with you, said another of my senior colleagues. Although Nathan Hart was talented, he had a hopelessly poor sense of direction and would immediately get lost even within the magical ministry, so when he left our department, he was usually accompanied by another person. Though apparently if his destination was nearby, he could just barely manage to get there by himself. The department Mr. Hart was headed to just happened to be on the way to where I was going, so I left the magical tool laboratory with him. Sorry about this. I place myself in your care, Mr. Hart apologized, and bowed his head. No, it's on the way to where I'm going, so please don't worry about it. Come to think of it, this might have actually been my first time walking alongside Mr. Hart like this. Now that I had the opportunity to look at him closely, I realized that he was actually fairly tall. That must have been why he appeared lanky, even though he wasn't especially thin. Because of his bangs and the thick lenses in his glasses, I couldn't really see his face. I suppose this meant that I had never seen Laura's or Nathan's face au naturel. However, as they often worked as a pair, perhaps they had seen each other's unadorned faces. Mr. Hart, have you ever seen Laura without her makeup? Guy, you mean? This was Laura's official name. Come to think of it, I never have. At any rate, he seems loath to take off his makeup. So much so that even when we're out on a mission, he'll set up a partition in the room we share, saying that he can't bear to be seen without makeup. Miss Laura, how much of a young maiden are you, refusing to be seen without makeup on? Though if it really was such a girly reason as that, I guess it's not like she's really hiding her true face. At least, no more so than Mr. Hart. Mr. Hart, you're not reluctant to show people your own face, are you? I inquired, since we were already on that topic. Not really. If I don't wear these glasses, I can barely see anything, so I always have them on. If I take them off, he casually removed his glasses, giving me a brief look of his unadorned face. He had a shocking lack of distinguishing facial features. How could I put it? He had the sort of face one would soon forget. I wondered whether or not I should tell him my honest impression. No distinguishing features, right? I'm still more likely to be remembered if I wear my glasses, Mr. Hart remarked, a wry smile on his face. Yes. That really is the case. Though I must ask, why are you interested in people's faces all of a sudden? Well, earlier, Miss Norman told me how Mr. Cornish ended up the way he is, so I wondered if the other senior colleagues in the department had their own stories. Sora had said that Miss Norman hadn't really hidden the truth about her throat or Mr. Cornish, so I shared what she had said with Mr. Hart. I see, so Lisa told you, did she? Mr. Hart smiled gently, as if he had already known all about the circumstances surrounding those two. Nix may talk and act that way, but he's actually very kind. Lisa is very important to him. That makes sense. I was completely taken in by the way he talks and acts. Ha ha ha, that's understandable, said Mr. Hart with a jolly laugh. But even that act is only something he does in order to stay close to Lisa. Hey, but Miss Norman said that Mr. Cornish has long since forgotten about all that, and is now just a narcissist. Yeah, he can certainly seem that way, but though Mr. Cornish may have been a poor student, he's actually quite sharp, so I think even now his act is all carefully considered. Really? Today, my image of Mr. Cornish as a narcissistic oddball had changed all of a sudden. You pay close attention to people, don't you, Mr. Hart? Since he had such a terrible sense of direction and was so prone to getting lost, I had imagined that life was already difficult enough for him, and he wouldn't have had any attention to spare for other people. I suppose I do. I spend most of my time working within the department, so over time I've somehow managed to acquire a general understanding of my colleagues there. Is that right? In an effort to avoid getting lost, Mr. Hart did spend most of his time in the department. Now that he mentioned it, it did make sense. In that case, do you understand me as well? I asked, to test him. Mr. Hart placed a finger on his chin as he considered this. Let me see. It seems like you're not very enthusiastic about your upcoming dark magic training. Unable to help myself, I opened my eyes wide. That was exactly how I was feeling at that moment. You are correct. How did you know? Is my face really that easy to read? I asked, burying my face in my hands as I thought about what Sora had said to me earlier. Ha ha ha, though I couldn't tell from your expression alone, you just seemed to have a slightly gloomy air about you. That's how you generally come off when you have dark magic training, Miss Clays, Mr. Hart replied. After hearing that my lack of enthusiasm had been noticed not just today, but every time I had dark magic training, I felt a mix of emotions that was hard to describe. Well, I know that for the future of the magical ministry, it's very important for me to practice dark magic. But I can't help being frightened by it. It wasn't as if all of my senior colleagues knew about my relationship with dark magic. Besides Laura and Mr. Hart, who had witnessed me using it while training, and Raphael and Sora, who were themselves dark magic users, there was just Larna, our department chief. None of my other senior colleagues knew about it. They had been told that Raphael and I were just practicing normal magic. Because of these circumstances, there were only a few people I could talk to about dark magic. So I thoughtlessly aired my complaints to Mr. Hart. It frightens you? Yes. After all, isn't dark magic an evil, terrifying form of magic used to control people's minds? I worry that if I practice it, and become able to use it, then I'll become evil myself. It wasn't as if anyone else knew this, but I was originally meant to be the villainess of this world. Blessed with the restoration of memories from my past life, and the positive influence of people around me, I had managed to lead a normal life without becoming a villainess. But I sometimes thought that, if I continued to practice dark magic, I would fall into darkness myself, and become a villainess after all. Each time that thought crossed my mind, it came with an indescribable feeling of unease. Is that what you think, Miss Clays? That dark magic is an evil, terrifying form of magic? Asked Mr. Hart, looking me squarely in the eye. Though I couldn't clearly see his eyes through his thick glasses, I could somehow sense that he was looking straight at me. Yes. I mean, isn't it evil to control people's minds? Mr. Hart took a moment to think about this, before answering, that is one way of thinking about it. But it's not the only point of view. There's another point of view. Yes. For example, suppose there was someone suffering through life with painful memories. If you were to use dark magic to erase those memories, that person would no longer have to suffer. In that situation, dark magic would be a good form of magic, would it not? I gaped at him. You're absolutely right. I'd never thought about it that way before. Certainly, if one used dark magic in the way Mr. Hart had described, then it would be a good form of magic. There are all kinds of things in this world. People view the world from the perspective they prefer. But that is only one perspective. There are always other sides to the story. Other sides. You view dark magic as evil, Miss Clays, do you not? In that case, was the person responsible for creating dark magic evil as well? That's what I've always thought. I mean, whoever it was obtained the power to control people's minds by taking someone else's life. But you're saying that perhaps there was another side to that person's story as well. Mr. Hart smiled slightly. Yes, perhaps. Perhaps they only wanted to protect something or someone precious to them. There is no one alive today who knows what happened. That's true. There were many sides to every story. Whatever one saw was only part of that. It would be fair to say that was obvious, but I still felt like my eyes had been opened to a new way of thinking. So rather than thinking of dark magic as inherently evil, try practicing it with the frame of mind that, one day, it might enable you to help someone else. That might help you feel a bit more motivated, concluded Mr. Hart. Ah, I see. I finally understood what he was trying to say. He had brought this up in order to raise my spirits, even just a little bit. Thank you so much. After picking up on Mr. Hart's intentions, I had to thank him. Not at all. I was only speaking hypothetically. He smiled. Just as we had come to a natural break in our conversation, we arrived at the entrance to the department where Mr. Hart had an appointment. I had never interacted with Mr. Hart one-on-one before. I knew he was good at his job, but outside of that I had only thought of him as an inconspicuous senior colleague who had no sense of direction and was always getting lost. I would have to amend my impression of him. He was a kind and dependable senior colleague. Well then, thanks again. Mr. Hart held up one hand to wave goodbye before heading in the opposite direction to the door he was meant to go through. Without delay, I grabbed his arm and informed him, "Mr. Hart, the entrance is over here." Then I dragged him back in front of the door. Ah, curses. Thanks once again. This time, he knocked on the correct door before walking inside. In an instant, the feeling I had had a moment earlier that he was a dependable senior colleague faded slightly. "It's me, Katarina Claes. May I enter?" "Come on in," called someone from inside. As I entered the room, I found that, just as I expected, the voice belonged to Raphael, who was sitting at a desk and working. While Larna pushed her duties as our department chief to one side and delved deeper into her own magical research, it was in actuality her deputy chief, Raphael, who kept the department running. As a result, his workload was no joke. I felt bad about asking him to instruct me in my dark magic training even under those circumstances. But Raphael would always say, "Please, don't worry about it, Miss Katarina. Spending time with you like this makes for a pleasant break, so far from being a drain, I actually feel more energized when I return to my other work." He really was a good mentor. Raphael paused his work and stared intently at my face. Not understanding the meaning of the look he gave me, I stared back at him blankly. "Have you had a change of heart about our training?" Raphael asked. "A change of heart?" "Yes, Miss Katarina. You always seem a bit downcast before our dark magic training, but today I don't get that impression." It appeared that my feelings on the subject had been uncovered not only by Mr. Hart, but by Raphael as well. But how? Was my face really so easy to read, just as Sora had claimed? It sounds like I've been making you worry all this time. I'm sorry. I felt the need to apologize. No. In the first place, you were forced to engage in this training by orders from above, so it's understandable if your heart isn't in it, said Raphael. That's true. I had been told to take part in this dark magic training because, even if I decoded the Dark Covenant, I was unable to leave any record of its contents unless I learned to use the spells within. Therefore, the top-ranking officials of the magical ministry had declared that they wanted me to try and learn to use its magic, at least the parts that were not dangerous. I was only studying it under those orders. I had actually planned to have Sora, who could also use dark magic, teach me. However, as Sora was far too lacking in any sense of how to teach others, the task had instead fallen to Raphael. Raphael had been able to use dark magic himself in the past, though he no longer could. Well, my lack of enthusiasm was more to do with my feelings about dark magic itself, rather than the fact that I was ordered to learn it by higher UPS. I explained to Raphael how I had felt that dark magic was not a good thing, and how my impression of it had changed as a result of what Mr. Hart had told me. Once I had finished telling Raphael all of this, he mused, "What reason did the creator of dark magic have for creating it?" I guess I'd never really thought about it. I hadn't given it much thought either, though I had always assumed that whoever created dark magic had an evil reason for doing so. But that isn't necessarily the case. Quite so, remarked Raphael. After pausing for a moment, he continued, for Marchioness Dyack, it was the fear of losing her son, Sirius, that drove her to use dark magic. Though her actions were still unforgivable, they were also the actions of a mother with a powerful desire to save her own son. It may not be quite right to judge what she did as purely evil. Raphael is such an amazing person, being able to consider the feelings of the person who once killed his mother and stole his life from him. If it were me, I would not be able to think about her in that way. Unsure of how I should respond, I remained silent for a while, searching for words to say. Raphael noticed this, and spoke again. Please, don't worry about me. Since I started working here at the Magical Ministry, I've found that my emotional trauma, which left me feeling so out of sorts, has been healing day by day. I'm at the point where I can speak calmly about what happened back then. After saying this, Raphael smiled slightly. Wounds sustained within one's heart were different from physical scars, in that they were not visible to others. Therefore, if the one suffering from those wounds insisted that they were fine, those around them had no alternative but to believe that. Even if they were in fact only putting on a brave face, their metaphorical wounds still gushed emotional blood. But in Raphael's case, I didn't think he was lying or trying to act tough. I was feeling bad about asking you to help me with my dark magic training. I thought it might have been painful for you to remember the awful things that happened in your past. Sounds like I've caused you a lot of concern. That's not how I feel, so don't worry. On the contrary, I'm actually delighted to have you all to myself for once, Miss Katerina, Raphael responded generously. Raphael really is a kind person, saying such things after being burdened with a useless student like me. Now then, in order that you might one day be able to help someone using dark magic, let us make the most of today's training. Yes, sir, I replied enthusiastically. Then we commenced our usual training. My dark magic training for the day concluded, and it was time for my lunch break. After telling Raphael, who mentioned that he would eat the lunch he had brought while tidying up documents not to work too hard, I headed to the ministry cafeteria. Just what should I eat today? I wondered. Lady Katerina, a voice called out to me. I'd know that adorable voice anywhere. Maria. Turning around, I saw Maria, who had become my friend at the Academy of Magic, and was now also working at the Magical Ministry. She waved and walked toward me. Maria was the very woman who was meant to be the protagonist of this Otome game, and develop a series of dazzling romances with the romanceable characters of this world. For some reason, at the end of the story of Fortune Lover, when we were still at the Academy, these interactions all led to a friendship end. However, soon after joining the ministry, her cuteness had already enthralled the head of her department and many of her colleagues who had joined at the same time. Are you about to have lunch? Yep. I was just wondering what I should eat today. I am also about to go to lunch. Would you like to eat together? Yep. Let's eat together. After Maria and I chose our meals, we found 2 vacant seats and sat down next to each other. By the way, Dewey isn't with you today, is he? Dewey, a romanceable character in Fortune Lover 2, worked in the same department as Maria and was already completely under her thrall. They had joined the ministry around the same time and were often seen together, but right now, Dewey was nowhere to be seen. Dewey has taken the day off. He said that he was going to go shopping with his family. Really? That's nice, isn't it? Dewey was a boy genius, who, after skipping ahead in school, became the youngest person to ever crack the Magical Ministry's difficult entrance examination. His parents, on the other hand, were horrible people who only ever treated their children as tools to be exploited, so Dewey and his siblings had suffered terribly. But not too long ago, a lot happened to change this, and with the encouragement of the magical ministry, Dewey and his siblings were able to leave their horrible parents behind. Since leaving home, they had moved into a family-oriented house rented out by the ministry, and lived without having to starve or shiver in the cold. From what I'd heard, Dewey's older brother had been put to work as a child and had never been to school. But now, while working at a job the ministry had helped him find, he was going to school, and seemed to find his days very fulfilling. I was so glad to hear that. "Lady Katarina, is Sora not with you today?" asked Maria, returning my question about Dewey by asking about my usual comrade, Sora. "That's right." Just as Maria and Dewey were known around the ministry for working together, Sora and I tended to work as a pair. Come to think of it, although we usually ran into each other near the cafeteria, today we hadn't. Though I guess we hadn't exactly agreed to go to lunch together, even if we did run into each other. "We're working separately today," I replied. In the past, since we were both new and were given the same sort of work, we had eaten together, but on days when we had different tasks, and therefore did not see each other, we rarely did so. Incidentally, Sora, who was starting to be treated as inseparable from me, was one of the romanceable characters in Fortune Lover 2. But as I was generally the one interacting with him, it was difficult for a game event between him and Maria to occur. So he did not yet seem to be head over heels for her, unlike Dewey and Cyrus, the other romanceable characters introduced in this sequel. Although, perhaps because of how many experiences Sora had had in the past, he was less likely than me to show his emotions on his face, so it might be difficult to uncover his true feelings. "May I sit here?" Perhaps it was because I had been talking about him, but when I turned around to find out who had spoken to me, I saw Sora standing there, holding a tray and grinning. "Ah, Sora. I'm sorry. I couldn't find you today, so I started eating without you," I apologized reflexively. "Nat, I was behind with my work anyway, so I don't mind at all. Besides, it's not as if we had promised to eat together. Ah, by the way, I brought someone else with me. Department Chief Lanchester." Looking over his shoulder, Sora called out to Cyrus, who came over with his shoulders slightly hunched. "Oh, Lord Cyrus. This is a surprise. We don't often see you in the cafeteria." Department Chief Cyrus Lanchester was head of the Magic and Magical Powers Research Department, the staffers of which were considered the star players of the magical ministry. He was a cool and beautiful man who also was good at his job. As he didn't talk much, and acted aloof, he could come off as hard to approach, but even so, given his pretty face and his professional prowess, he was of course a subject of longing for many single women in society. But there was another side to Cyrus. Because he had been raised in a rural village near the kingdom's border, he had not developed any specific immunity against young women. So unless it involved work, he would always get nervous around women, and could not communicate well with them. His symptoms had been especially bad shortly after he had joined the ministry. They had been made worse by the young noblewomen here in the capital, who teased him mercilessly for his regional accent. When he told me his story, he admitted that he had never before interacted with young women outside of work. The only ones around here who knew this fact about Cyrus were me, who he looked upon as a granny who liked farming, and therefore felt comfortable around, and Maria, the object of his affection. There was a possibility that Sora, who was very sharp, had also realized this, but he didn't dare to say anything on the subject. Anyway, that being the case with Cyrus, he never came to the cafeteria, which was full of people and, more to the point, young women. So we were surprised to see him now. As if reading my mind, Cyrus said, "Recently, I've started to avail myself of the cafeteria. For the sake of my future, I thought there were a number of things I should get used to." I noticed that, for a moment, his gaze turned to Maria. Cyrus was attracted to Maria's kindness and warmth. Recently, Maria had started to participate in working on the vegetable plot we furtively kept on ministry grounds. Through this, along with the self-defense lessons she had asked Cyrus for, Cyrus had slowly, at a tortoise's pace, started to become more friendly with Maria, and was now able to converse with her a little. When Maria did not join us on our vegetable plot, Cyrus spoke excitedly to me, a so-called farming granny, about how happy this relationship progress made him. To think that this cool beauty, who gave off an air of having long since tired of dalliances with women, in fact turned beet red each time he so much as touched a woman's hand during self-defense lessons. I couldn't help but think of him as my adorable little brother. I guessed that he had not only come to the cafeteria he had previously avoided in order to get used to women, but thinking that he would like to spend even a little more time with Maria if he could. Apart from that, having observed that Dewey, who had received some advice on romance from Sora, had recently begun to pursue Maria more proactively, Cyrus probably felt that he needed to try harder himself. But for the time being, Cyrus was sitting opposite me. Hey? There's a seat empty opposite Maria, why wouldn't you seize your chance to sit across from her? Isn't that why you're here? I thoughtlessly glanced in Cyrus's direction as I thought this, but he only looked away awkwardly. I guess it was too much to expect him to sit across from Maria while he ate. Is he really romanceable and fortune lover too? How is he ever supposed to end up with Maria? As Cyrus had sat opposite me, Sora sat opposite Maria. I did not know how Sora felt about Maria, but in contrast to Cyrus, Sora seemed to be quite used to interacting with women. If he were attracted to Maria and decided to pursue her seriously, I bet Cyrus would lose her immediately. Have you had a tough time at work today? I inquired of Sora. He had previously admitted that he had been falling behind with his work more than usual. The work is no different than usual, but fewer of our senior colleagues are around today, so I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Ah, that's right. Laura and Mr. Cornish are out of the office today, aren't they? I recalled seeing them leave that very morning, wearing their mysterious disguises. Though the magical ministry was the most prestigious place to work in the kingdom, it was also known for taking on nearly any kind of work. So it was not uncommon for the ministry to receive requests from citizens to do grunt work outside its premises, such as pest control. In particular, our department, the Magical Tool Laboratory, had a lot of miscellaneous tasks thrown at it. If we're short-handed, perhaps I should be getting back to the office. After lunch, the task of decoding the Dark Covenant, and my never-ending battle with sleepiness, awaited me. If I was honest, it wasn't a task I particularly wanted to do actually. I didn't want to do it at all, so I made this offer thinking that work in the department would be preferable. No, it's not as overwhelming as that, said Sora, before stealing a glance at Cyrus. Cyrus nodded firmly, agreeing with Sora. You must prioritize decoding the Covenant, Miss Clays. You are to perform that task. His tone was resolute. I reluctantly answered, yes, sir. Seeing how despondent I looked, Maria, who would herself be working on decoding the Light Covenant, tried to encourage me, saying, let's do our best. Yeah. Wake me up if I start to fall asleep, okay? I replied, already feeling close to dozing off. If eating makes you sleepy, why don't you try eating less? Asked Sora, looking at my lunch tray piled with food. Come on. If I don't eat lots of tasty food at lunchtime, I won't be able to work hard in the afternoon. As I assumed an expression of staunch refusal, Sora smiled wryly. Once we had all brought up a few points of small talk, our conversation turned to a new topic. We decided to discuss which students at the Academy of Magic were likely to be invited to work at the Ministry next year. Oh, so it's already time for the invitations to start going out. I mused. Come to think of it, I have a feeling that it was around this time of year that the Magical Ministry first reached out to me, noted Maria, as if recalling her invitation to the Ministry at that very moment. Is that so? They reached out as early as that. I was surprised, as the next cohort of Academy graduates still had nearly 6 months of school left. Cyrus explained, any workplace seeking talented individuals is the same. It's essential to reach out earlier rather than later. Moreover, as the magical ministry shares its grounds with the Academy of Magic, employees at the ministry are often asked to teach at the academy. So the relationship between the institutions is strong, and ministry officials have a good idea of the kind of students currently enrolled at the academy. Given all of this, they can start sending out invitations early. This rang a bell. Now that you mention it, I remember one of my teachers at the academy saying that he had come from the magical ministry. Was that in order to find exceptional students? In the first place, employees of the ministry are called on to teach because there just aren't many people who can teach magic well, but they are also likely motivated by a desire to identify exceptional students as quickly as possible, so they can invite the best students to the ministry early, replied Cyrus. That makes sense, I mused. In that case, the fact that Maria had been approached so early was perfectly logical. After all, Maria was a wonderful girl with strong magical aptitude and exceptional grades. Ah, that's right. If the magical ministry typically contacted such exceptional potential recruits in that fashion. I happen to know some students on the Academy's student council who have their hearts set on joining the magical ministry. Do you think the ministry is likely to approach them as well? I ventured to ask, remembering Frey and Ginger. Although Ginger was slightly lacking in magic, they were both exceptional students. If they so wished, I was sure they would receive a recommendation. Let me see. If they're good enough academically to be members of the student council, then they'll have already received their invitations. Though that would depend on them not having family duties to inherit. Ah, I see your point. People with family duties to inherit cannot join the magical ministry, can they? Keith, my adoptive brother, and Nicole, for example, were going to take over the duties of running their households, so they were already working alongside their fathers. I guess someone with that role to fulfill wouldn't also be able to work at the magical ministry. As for me, I have an older brother, so I was free to work wherever I wanted and chose the ministry, but there are many restrictions placed on those who will take over the running of their households, continued Cyrus. Though I had not been aware of many such situations in my previous life, in this world, more often than not, children would one day take over their parents' work, and could not live according to their own wishes. In my case, though I was currently working at the magical ministry, I still felt pressured to get married one day and look after domestic duties. Life felt more constrained in this world than it had in my previous life. Well, in my previous world I only lived as a student, so I might have found many more differences if I had experienced working life back then as well. Ginger came from a house of low-ranking nobles, and she also had brothers, so I had the feeling that she would have no problem joining the ministry. She had said herself that she wanted to work and send money home. But what about Frey? Now that I thought about it, I really knew nothing about her family's circumstances. I was pretty sure that she was still being treated as the daughter of the Marquis, but didn't that mean that she would be expected to marry soon after graduation? I had heard that was a typical progression for high-ranking noble women. Though for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the case for many of the girls around me. Still, if Frey herself had a strong desire to work here, and the Marquis already had a successor, then there shouldn't be a problem with her joining the ministry. I remembered how her eyes had sparkled as she talked about the future. I definitely wanted her to be able to work here. I don't know too much about their family's circumstances, but I know they really want to work here, so I hope the ministry can accept them, I said, indirectly referring to Ginger and Frey. Very well. Getting exceptional recruits is a good thing for us too. I'll briefly check out the recruitment process myself, Cyrus responded, helpfully. Thank you so much. With one of the ministry's leaders on my side and Cyrus, the head of the ministry's top department, at that I was sure that everything would be fine. In the course of that discussion we finished our lunch, and, as usual, I went together with Maria to the room we were borrowing to work on decoding the covenants. Just as I expected, the moment I sat down, I started to feel sleepy. So I tried taking some big stretches and rotating my arms, somehow managing to fight off my drowsiness. I couldn't let it win every time. Not being able to read ancient script, I had barely managed to decode any of my covenant. That being said, there were a lot of warning messages to work through, delaying me from getting to the various descriptions of magic, so that was another reason for my lack of progress. The Dark Covenant had a ton of warnings written in it. Be wary of this, you must not do that, and so forth. Perhaps the person who wrote it was just a worrywart, but in any case, when they wrote, they had tried to communicate that one should not use dark magic lightly. Excessively so. Hey, Maria. Are there a lot of warnings written in the Covenant of Light? I asked her as she was working right beside me. Yes, I think there are some. There are at least a few places where it is noted that one should not use its contents heedlessly. But not very many. Though I would not have expected it to contain over 10 pages of warnings, I was a little bit surprised to hear that the Covenant of Light even needed a warning not to treat its contents casually at all. But why does it need to say that? Isn't light magic a wonderful thing that heals people? I suppose it is. Being able to heal people's wounds may be a good thing, but perhaps it could be dangerous to rely on it too much. Dangerous? But how? Well, though it is not written explicitly, and this is only my guess based on the text, here is an example. If one can use light magic to heal any wounds, one may start to think that, as long as one does not die, injuries do not pose a problem. I see. That sounds possible. If it were me, I might end up thinking that way. If one goes down that path, one's sense of fear and peril toward injury will start to fade away. There might be more people who go too far and lose their lives. The overuse of light magic could lead one to think that it is fine to hurt people's feelings, or that there is no problem with being reckless. I think there is a danger of fostering that kind of conceited thinking. I had never considered light magic to be anything other than a wonderful power that could heal people, so I would have thought that the more one used it, the more people one could bring happiness to. But I had to agree with what Maria had said. If one thought that one's wounds could always be mended by magic, it could give rise to careless behavior. You might think that there would be no problem with a little recklessness. You're very wise, Maria. I had never thought about it as far as that. Oh, no, I just somehow felt that that's what the warnings written here were trying to say, Maria replied modestly. But I thought it was amazing that she had managed to read between the lines like that. When I read all the warnings in my covenant, I hadn't thought anything except that the person who wrote them was probably a worrywart. Struck by how deeply she considered various matters, I felt like asking Maria about dark magic. I told her about the conversation I had had with Mr. Hart that morning. The reason dark magic was created? Though I have never really thought about it either, I certainly am curious about it now, said Maria, before assuming a thinking pose. Yet, I had always assumed that someone bad created it in order to control people, but I guess we'll never know the truth. When I first became aware of the existence of dark magic, I thought that its only purpose was to control people's minds, but now I know that it can do many other things. That's true. The first time we encountered dark magic, we perceived that it was chiefly used to control people's minds in particular, to amplify the emotions that people already had. But since meeting that woman with black hair, Sarah, we had learned that there was more to dark magic. It could be used to create familiars or other dimensions, or to launch attacks. We had learned that its uses could branch out in many directions. There were still many mysteries about dark magic, a form of magic that did not exist in nature. For what purpose it had been created, no one knew. However, I felt like my way of thinking about dark magic, which before this I had only judged as scary, had changed slightly. Okay, let's get down to decoding the covenant, with gusto. Or, so I thought, but gusto alone would not change the pace of the decoding process, which I had to do with a dictionary in one hand. I managed to achieve about the same amount of progress as usual before the workday was over. When I headed home from work each day, I usually walked to the ministry gates with Sora, so at some point it had become a habit. Today, however, because our senior colleagues had gone to work outside the office, and Sora had to cover their responsibilities as well, he hadn't finished by the time I left. I thought about helping him, but I was told that they weren't as short-handed as that, and to please go home. So I headed for the gates by myself. As I walked to the gates alone, I spied the 2 senior co-workers I had seen that morning, coming the other way in their disguises. "Laura, Mr. Cornish. You look tired. Have you finished your work for the day?" I called out to them. "Yes, all done for today." I had to pay careful attention to how I spoke, among other things, so I am more tired than usual, answered Laura, puffing out her cheeks. With how Laura usually looked, I thought this mannerism suited her, or at least, I was used to it, but in the guise of a typical, muscular man, it made for an odd impression. "Ah. I am very tired myself." Pretending to be plain was painful in itself, but having to spend the day with my beautiful face made up to look like this was difficult to bear. "I want my regular face back, at once," cried Mr. Cornish, almost shouting, as he embraced himself. In the past, I would have brushed this off as the behavior of a very weird senior colleague, but after all I had heard that day, I knew he was playing this character for the sake of Miss Norman, so I felt a little bit moved by it. "Hey, what's the matter, Miss Clays? You hungry or something?" "I'm afraid I have nothing for you to eat," said Mr. Cornish, needlessly raising his arms and waving them dramatically. His pose emphasized the message that he had nothing at all. "Oh, no, I said. Hey, where did that feeling come from?" It was strange. As I watched Mr. Cornish's exaggerated gestures, I felt those sentimental feelings ebb away. It was also strange that, when seeing me fall silent, most people assumed I was hungry. Oh my, I nearly forgot. I do have this. "Give me your hand, darling," Laura said to me. I did as I was instructed, and Laura placed a piece of candy, in adorable wrapping paper, in the palm of my hand. "Enjoy." "Thank you very much." Looks like Laura thought I was hungry too. How odd. Although I wasn't actually hungry, I was still happy to receive the candy. "Now then, we're off to submit our report. Take care on your way home," called Laura before walking away, dragging Mr. Cornish behind her with one hand and waving with the other. Strangely, even though she was not wearing women's clothing today, and was for all the world a macho man, I found myself wanting to call her mom. Come to think of it, Sora mentioned that Laura might have some secrets of her own, didn't he? If the kind and cheerful Laura did have secrets, I was pretty sure that they would not be very serious. That was because she was always so cheerful, always smiling, and never gloomy. Even so, if she was harboring a serious secret underneath her cheerful smile, I was convinced that it was not something I should investigate too casually. One should not try to expose what others are desperate to conceal. Well, regardless of what she may be hiding, nothing would change the fact that she was my kind and dependable senior colleague. After seeing the two of them off, I headed back to the gates myself. Once I had made it home, after dozing off in my horse-drawn carriage as usual, I found that Keith and my father had not come back yet. Apparently, something urgent had come up in their work and they would be home late that night. For my father, who always put family first, this was rare. In the end, when it was time for dinner they were still not home, so I had dinner with my mother. This dinner between a mother and her daughter alone, the first we had had in a very long time, could have just as well have been called an interrogation. She asked me, "Are you doing your job properly at the magical ministry?" among other such questions. I guess as far as my mother was concerned, her daughter would always be a handful, and she would always worry. But the subject of her concerns had hardly changed since I was a kid. "Mother, your daughter is now a working adult. You will not find me climbing trees or fishing at work." "Well, I do indulge in a bit of gardening, it is my hobby, after all." My dinner with my mother ended, and by the time I had finished getting ready for bed, it looked like Keith and my father were still not home. While I thought about just how rare this was, I remembered that I had work again tomorrow, and got into bed. As I was staring vacantly at the ceiling, for some reason, the conversation with Mr. Hart I had had that day, about the reason why dark magic was created, crossed my mind. Just who created it, and for what purpose? Perhaps when I made some headway in decoding the Dark Covenant, we would find some answers to those questions. Come to think of it, Katarina in Fortune Lover 2 was supposed to have finished decoding the Dark Covenant and mastered its magic, right? Why is the Katarina in the sequel game more capable than me? But wait, if she was so capable, why would she come back to get caught after already being exiled from the kingdom? Looking at it that way, perhaps she was no cleverer than me after all? On top of that, what did she think she was doing getting in between the protagonist and the new romanceable characters in Fortune Lover 2, when there were still so many other characters? Didn't she need to get in the way of Jedward and Keith anymore? Wasn't there a need to see that through? That's right. Fortune Lover 2 doesn't only feature Katarina, but the rival characters from the first game. If I remember correctly, the protagonist can interact with each of the rival characters, and, if the protagonist manages to get along with them, and they recognize her value, then her romance will progress. This is all according to a mysterious note I found, written in Japanese, hidden between the pages of an old book. For Alan, there was Mary, and Nicole would be accompanied by Sophia, but what about Jedward and Keith? Would Katarina be the protagonist's rival for those routes as well? Hold on, in that case Katarina wouldn't be available to get in the way of the new characters. However light on her feet Katarina might be, between Jedward, Keith, and all the new characters, there were just too many people to deal with. I don't think she'd be able to get in everyone's way. How was that supposed to work? If only I could have a dream about that part of the story, but will I ever have another one of those dreams about again? Maybe if I fall asleep while thinking about my past life, it'll happen? But I've never managed to have one just by wanting to before. But I guess I'll give it a try anyway. My past life, Otome games, manga, anime, sweets, cup ramen, potato chips, what else? Lady Katarina, it's morning. Time to get up. I awoke to the sound of Anne's voice, as always. Somehow, I had the feeling that my dream last night had been a pleasant one, full of food. Please get up and get ready. It's nearly time for you to depart for the magical ministry. As always, Anne briskly set about helping me get ready for work. Though I was still half asleep, I found that by leaving it to her, I was soon ready. After wolfing down my breakfast, I headed to my horse-drawn carriage. Though the Clays family had dinner together most days, more often than not, we ate breakfast separately. I suppose with everyone working, our schedules did not necessarily align. So today, as usual, I ate breakfast alone. I intended to hop straight in the carriage and head to the ministry afterward. However, for some reason, on my way to the carriage, my father made an appearance. "Good morning, father. Is something the matter?" Since my father had arrived home late last night, I thought he would still be resting, but perhaps he was so busy that he had to leave for work early today as well? "Good morning, Katarina. Actually, I need to speak with you for a moment." "Oh, what about?" "Well, the truth is that, starting today, I've been thinking of having some guards escort you on your way." "Guards, you say?" I was seriously shocked by this sudden development. Well, I suppose it's normal for someone of my rank to be escorted by guards. But in the area where I was normally active, around the capital city of Sourcey, public order was well established, so the subject of my being escorted by guards had never come up before. So what need is there, all of a sudden? Besides, I was on my way to the magical ministry, which was regarded as being as safe as a castle. Surely there was no need for me to have guards. Why do I need guards all of a sudden? Has an old nemesis of yours returned, father? Though my father was fundamentally a peaceful, reasonable person, when matters concerned his family, he had a tendency to get carried away. Perhaps on one of those occasions he found himself an enemy? No, I have no nemesis, but recently, I've been caught up with a troublesome individual. So I'm taking necessary measures. Has Keith told you about the disagreement with Marquis Randall's family? Marquis Randall? Does he mean Lady Susanna's family? Now that you mention it, Keith did say something to the effect of be careful, didn't he? Yes. He told me that the Marquis has a strong desire to accumulate power, and seems to be frustrated by the fact that Lady Susanna and Prince Geoffrey are not yet married. That's right. And that frustration has led him to meddle in our affairs, in all sorts of ways. This is why it is troublesome when someone is powerful, but not very popular. Ah, so he's not very popular. Because he was Lady Susanna's father, I had previously imagined him having a similar friendly personality, but I guess I was wrong. Hold on, didn't Keith say that Lady Susanna and her father don't get along? For that to be the case, I guess he would have to be a difficult person. So you think the Marquis might try to do something to me? I had never met the man, and it was not as if harming me would help him obtain power. Quite the contrary, if he incurred the wrath of my father, who loved his family deeply, it could not end well for him. Of course, I don't want to even think about that, but to appeal to his sense of reason, and stop him getting any ideas, I think it would be best for you to travel with guards. As for when you're at the magical ministry, I've made other arrangements with the institution, so you'll only need Clay's family guards when you travel to and from the ministry by carriage. Oh, right. I understand, I responded enthusiastically. Just be careful. I will see you later. My father then waved to me and left. Apparently he had only come to announce that I would be guarded for the time being. But guards, really? If I have to travel in the carriage with other people, especially people who aren't Anne or Keith, I'll feel reluctant about falling fast asleep. As for my security at the ministry, as my work often involved classified information, like my study of dark magic, I guessed that I would be guarded by someone within the ministry, but unless it was someone I already knew very well, that would bother me. What a pain. I then realized that instead of worrying about the nuisance of being accompanied by guards, I should be worried about what Marquis Randall might try to do. With a sigh, I stepped into the carriage, and was surprised to learn that rather than boarding the carriage with me, my guards were to follow me on horseback. I was relieved by the thought that I could still fall fast asleep if I wanted, no problem. Incidentally, my guards turned out to be some young men who had often helped me with field work in the past. Today was my first time learning that their actual role in the Clay's household was to stand guard. Hey? My lady, just what did you think we were here for? Asked one of the young men. I gave them my honest answer. I thought you were here to help with the gardening. Then they all sighed. Well, you know. It's not as if I needed guards around me up until now. Oh, hang on those occasions that they followed me to the garden, were they in fact guarding me? And so, although my carriage was accompanied by guards, I started on my work commute, doing nothing out of the ordinary myself. Chapter 3, Guards. Since I was still alone in the carriage as I headed to work, I was able to doze off completely, just as I always did. Before I knew it, we had arrived at the magical ministry, and the driver of the carriage was waking me up. For the walk from the carriage to the ministry gates, I was accompanied by my guards. I kind of feel like the daughter of a noble house. Ah, but of course, I am the daughter of a noble house. When I arrived at the gates, for some reason Sora was waiting there for me. Good morning, Sora politely greeted me and the guards. Good morning. Please take care of the young lady, one of the guards replied. Then they left. I watched the entire interaction with a question mark hanging over my head. Sora, what's going on? I inquired, while watching the guardsmen depart from behind. On this day, I will be undertaking the duty of guarding Lady Katarina Clays at the Magical Ministry. My name is Sora Smith. I look forward to serving you. Sora bowed gracefully, in the style of a butler, just the way he had when we first met. Why, you're my guard at the ministry? Seeing how shocked I was, Sora looked puzzled himself. Haven't you heard? At that moment, I remembered what my father had said to me before I left home that morning. As for when you're at the Magical Ministry, I've made other arrangements with the institution. That's right, he might have mentioned something about asking someone at the ministry. I was told I'd have another guard here. But is that really going to be you, Sora? Yet. We are in the same department, and I'm already aware of your various circumstances, so I was deemed the most suitable. That's certainly true. Sora is aware of my involvement in dark magic, as well as the existence of the Dark Covenant. Maria's Covenant too. There probably isn't anyone more suitable. But, Sora, don't you have your own work to do? I'd feel bad about having to ask you to worry about guarding me instead. As an employee of the Magical Tool Laboratory, Sora had already taken on a lot of work, so if he had to step away to guard me, it would be tough on the department. Don't worry about that. Duke Clays made a formal request to the Magical Ministry to have you protected, and offered compensation, so even if I have to step away from my usual duties, the Ministry can send someone from another department to cover my work. I see. So Father made a formal request to the Ministry. Because the Ministry already did all kinds of odd jobs, I had heard of them receiving requests to protect people in the past, but as for one employee guarding another internally, that somehow seemed strange. Still, you have a great dad. Hey? My father. Yet. I mean, he respects your wishes, doesn't he? Rather than appointing guards for you, it would have been easier for him to just order you to take time off from work and stay at home. When Sora pointed this out to me, I was startled. That was because he was absolutely right. Though I now felt there was purpose in my work, and I wanted to do the best job that I could, at first I went into it with the aim of avoiding my marriage to Jetord. I did not feel ready to join the royal family yet, so I fled. In fact, people had made all sorts of remarks about me, like that Duke's daughter is just killing time, she won't be here for long. Even my father had probably heard similar remarks in his workplace. There were many people who did not look favorably upon a daughter of a noble family old enough to marry entering the workforce. In spite of that, instead of telling his daughter, who had earned him no praise from the people around him, to take a break from her job, my father still sent me to work, even when it meant appointing guards. This, along with the fact that he had not hurried me into marriage, meant that, yes, my father really did always respect my feelings. I truly was blessed to have the family I had in my past life as well as in this one. I really am lucky, I muttered to myself, without thinking. Yet, lucky you, agreed Sora, smiling at me. Yep. Well, Sora, I'd be very happy to have you guard me. Please, leave it to me. He bowed respectfully. So it was that I headed to our department with Sora, who had assumed the aura of a well-trained butler. I knocked on the door to the Magical Tool Laboratory before entering. Under normal circumstances, as Sora was with me today, I would have expected to be the first one to arrive, but today others had preceded us. Oh my, good morning. There was Laura, who today was once again disguised as a muscular man. Oh, morning newbies. With her was Mr. Cornish. Like yesterday, he, too, was in disguise, wearing normal, plain, clothes and makeup. It looked like they were about to go out on a mission again. Will you be working outside of the office again today? I asked them. In response, Mr. Cornish assumed an exaggerated pose of despair, and lamented, yes, that's right. Once again, I must play the role of a plain person, wearing these plain clothes. The world weeps at the loss of a beauty such as me. Mr. Cornish only acts this way for Miss Norman's sake. For Miss Norman's sake. So I told myself inside my head. Why, yes. Looking after this idiot has really tired me out, so I would have preferred to polish this task off quickly, but easier said than done, I suppose. It looks like it will take a while longer. Laura placed her hands on her cheeks and sighed. Even though she looked like an ordinary man at this moment, her mannerisms were the same as usual. Somehow, this was more than a little disconcerting. However, I was more concerned by the thought that our senior colleagues would continue to be working outside the office, like yesterday, which would mean. So, our department will be short-handed again today. Given that, is it really all right for you to have to accompany me all day? I once again felt bad about monopolizing Sora to serve as my bodyguard. It's fine, they've said a number of people more talented than me are coming to help, Sora answered casually, though I knew that, despite him being a relatively new employee, our senior colleagues already considered Sora to be very talented and good at his job. With that in mind, I was even more concerned about depriving the department of this skilled worker. Father, just how much did you pay to hire him? What's this about? Asked Laura with a puzzled expression. She had overheard the discussion between Sora and me. It appeared that our senior colleagues had not already been informed of the fact that Sora would be guarding me. I explained that Sora had received a request from my father, via the magical ministry, to be my bodyguard. Laura considered this. Oh, really? So Sora will be your bodyguard? Of course, you are the daughter of a duke, Lady Katarina, however you might look. Though given the way you act, I just keep forgetting. The way I act? Once again, I was not sure whether my senior colleague was praising me or insulting me. But you've been working here normally up until now. Why the sudden change? Asked Laura. Well, I thought to myself, is it really okay for me to talk to my colleagues about the matter my family is tangled up in with Marquis Randall? Laura, perceptive as ever, understood how I was feeling instantly. If you're not able to talk about it, don't let me force you. She gave me a smile. When it came to being thoughtful, Laura was an expert, I reflected with admiration. But if your situation requires you to have a bodyguard all of a sudden, I must tell you to be careful, she continued, with a serious expression on her face. Next to Laura, Mr. Cornish, who seemed like he hadn't listened to a word of our conversation, added, "Yeah, be careful," with an earnest look on his face. Was it perhaps kind of a big deal to be escorted by guards at the magical ministry? As the person being escorted, I had not really felt that this was the case myself. After warning me to be careful once more for good measure, my two senior colleagues went off to work, still complaining about their disguises. After we had watched Laura and Mr. Cornish leave, I asked Sora, I wonder, is it kind of a big deal to be escorted by guards at the magical ministry? It still hasn't been that long since I started working here, so I can't say for certain, but I've never seen an employee here with guards before, he responded. I guess you're right. I had never seen one either, even though many workers at the magical ministry came from noble families. I suppose that showed just how safe the ministry was considered to be. The kingdom of Sorcy, the most prosperous of the group of neighboring kingdoms to which it belonged, was known to be very safe. Furthermore, the areas in which I was typically active, the Royal Palace, the Academy of Magic, and the Magical Ministry, were particularly safe places even within Sorcy. Nothing bad had ever happened in these places, not even to a young noblewoman strutting around by herself. Though I had imagined that that was how those places had always been, I recalled the time the royal family summoned me to their castle and told me their story. They told me how there had been a fearsome struggle for the throne within the royal palace, during which some had even had their lives taken from them. This had also involved the use of dark magic. I reflected that although Sorcy was a wealthy country, not everyone who lived here was a good person. I was definitely aware of this, but I was still just a bit shocked to have encountered someone requiring so much caution that I needed to have guards to escort me. Marquis Randall. Though I had never met the man face to face, what I did know was that my father had never been so wary of someone before that he had felt the need to take such measures. I wondered if Lady Susanna, his daughter, was in any danger. But they had spent many years together as father and daughter, and seemed to not be living together at the moment, so she would probably be fine. Besides, Lady Susanna had Prince Geoffrey. He was someone who even Jedward admired. I was sure he would do whatever it took to protect Lady Susanna. In that case, I should take appropriate actions to protect myself and the people who worried about me. I resolved to do so. Still, I could not help but wish that Marquis Randall would lose interest in the Clays family. While Sora and I were performing our morning duties, cleaning the office in preparation for the workday, the rest of our senior colleagues arrived one after the other. Incidentally, because Larna was out of the office today on official not personal business, responsibility for the department fell to her deputy chief Raphael. As a result, my dark magic class with him would have to be postponed. Also, because Raphael was temporarily in charge of the department, he had been made aware of the fact that Sora had been hired to be my bodyguard. Sora, please take good care of Miss Clays. She is someone very dear to all of us. Raphael almost sounded like a character in one of the television dramas I recalled from my past life. Hey, what kind of line is that? It was Father, I bet. Father said that when he made the request, didn't he? Curse my adoring father. How can he be so embarrassing? To make matters worse, Sora bowed respectfully and replied, Yes, sir. Of course I will. You didn't have to say that, Sora. Though I was still feeling extremely embarrassed, today I would contend with my work decoding the Covenant starting first thing in the morning. To the extent that I would feel less sleepy than I normally would when starting after lunch, I thought that it might seem easier today. And even if I did fall asleep, having my bodyguard Sora with me meant I would have someone right there to wake me up. When I arrived at the room Maria and I were sharing as we decoded our respective covenants, Maria was already there. And for some reason, I found Cyrus standing next to her. Cyrus, the busy head of the Magic and Magical Powers Research Department, almost never came here. Mr. Cyrus, what brings you here at this hour? I inquired. Cyrus raised an eyebrow slightly. Ah, Lady Katarina. I have something I'd like to ask you about. Though he had broached the subject casually, I could scarcely believe what Cyrus wanted to talk about. After I had talked to him about my juniors at the academy over lunch the previous day, Cyrus, who was known for working quickly, had apparently set about investigating their prospects at the ministry after work that very day. In the course of doing so, he had discovered something unexpected, so he had come to confirm the truth of the matter with me and Maria. Firstly, he had found that although Ginger's magic was not especially powerful, she was a truly brilliant student, and because she had a lot of brothers, there was no question of her having to inherit the responsibilities of her family. He had checked with the ministry and they could see no problem with scouting her. But in Frey's case, there was a problem. To my amazement, I was told that Frey Randall had begun to introduce herself as the fiancée of Jedward Stewart, the third-born prince. Wah. At first, this was all I had to say on the matter. After all, I had no idea what he was talking about. There was only one Jedward Stewart, third-born prince in this kingdom. And at present, I was pretty sure that he was my fiancé. If our engagement had been broken off, no one had told me about it. On the contrary, I had just recently told Jedward about my feelings, after my father had asked me what I intended to do about our engagement. Hold on, could it be that after that, Jedward lost interest in me and decided to break it off? No, I had not heard anything of the sort, and besides, just the other day, we were working in the fields together. Moreover, Frey was also there, and she had not said anything about it. I mean, it was there that she told me how much she wanted to work at the magical ministry, her eyes sparkling with excitement. What does this mean? I asked Cyrus, drawing closer to him. I don't know what's going on either, that's why I came to ask you and Maria. Cyrus wore a troubled expression on his face. I see. Please excuse me. No. Though, really, what does this mean? You, Lady Katarina, are supposed to be Prince Jedward's fiancée. If only I hailed from the kingdom's interior myself, I would have a few more ways to investigate the matter. Cyrus placed a hand on his forehead. Is your birthplace of some relevance, Mr. Cyrus? Yet. Though I have connections here at the ministry, as I'm originally from a village near the border, I'm not well acquainted with the nobles here in the heart of the kingdom. That makes it difficult to gather information about them. Oh yet. As the son of a margrave, Cyrus was raised in a region at the further reaches of the kingdom. There had been no young women there, which is why he has a hard time with them now. Cyrus looked at me. I wonder if it might not be easier for you to ascertain the veracity of such information, Lady Katarina. True, I am the daughter of a duke, born and raised in the heart of this country. From the perspective of rural nobles like Cyrus, I guess I could be called a bona fide noblewoman from the center of the kingdom. However, I'm sorry to say that I'm not capable of doing anything so sophisticated as ascertaining the veracity of information. That's the kind of thing I'm worst at. I'm really no good at gathering that kind of information, I confessed as I looked back at Cyrus, trying to express all of my feelings in those few words. Cyrus accepted this response with a look of disappointment on his face, or perhaps I should say he looked pitiful. It seemed that I had managed to convey my feelings. As he stared at me with that lamentable look, I quickly averted my own eyes. By the way, what are you doing here, Sora Smith? Do you have some business here as well? Wondered Cyrus, addressing Sora behind me. It seemed that his plan was to change the subject. Or rather, the fact that Sora was acting as my bodyguard may not have been communicated to Cyrus, who belonged to another department, so he could have genuinely been wondering what Sora was doing there. The magical ministry received a request from Duke Clays to have his daughter assigned a bodyguard, so starting today, I will be responsible for the safety of Lady Katarina Clays. Sora explained the matter in much the same way he had done for Laura and Mr. Cornish. Cyrus's expression turned to one of puzzlement. A bodyguard? For Miss Katarina? She's never needed one before, so why should she need one now? Well, I guess that's true. Up until now I've come to work just as I pleased, without being escorted by guards. Well, a lot happened between some of us nobles, leading to one thing or another, and so father decided that I would have to be accompanied by guards, I answered evasively, not knowing whether this was something I should speak about too readily to Cyrus. Cyrus seemed to be able to pick up on the gist of my circumstances. I guess a lot does go on between nobles, especially in the center of the kingdom. He nodded, then muttered, "What on earth is the House of Randall thinking?" Startled, I raised my head again and cried, "Why, Mr. Cyrus, has the House of Randall done something to you as well?" Cyrus furrowed his brow. "What do you mean, to me as well? Has the House of Randall done something to you, Miss Katarina?" So questioned, and having already revealed too much, I disclosed to Cyrus and Maria the events leading up to me requiring bodyguards. I asked them to please try not to mention it to anyone else. I see, so that's how it is. With his brow still furrowed, Cyrus nodded. It's not as if he's done anything to me yet. This is just in case he does try something. Incidentally, what made you bring up the House of Randall a moment ago, Mr. Cyrus? Ah, right. I was thinking about your former classmate, Frey Randall. Regarding the question of her candidacy for the engagement of Prince Jedward, I can't imagine that she has undertaken that move alone. Though I'm sure it was her family's decision, what I can't figure out is why. Why now? Before Cyrus could finish speaking, I leaped up from my chair and cried, "What, really? Frey's family name is Randall." You finally realized, hey. Sora gasped from behind me, quietly and with an air of disbelief. Wa Sora, you knew. I swept around to look at him. Wouldn't anyone have figured it out after hearing the same name that we heard just a moment ago? He regarded me with a look of disbelief. Ooh. If you knew, then you could have told me. I pouted. Today my duty is to be your bodyguard. I am devoting myself to remaining in your shadow. Though if you still didn't realize, I was eventually going to tell you, was Sora's comment. Seriously? Am I really supposed to believe that letting me make a fool of myself was a necessary part of being devoted to his bodyguard work? I mean, well. Anyway, I still would have liked him to tell me sooner. So, Miss Katarina, is it safe to say that your former schoolmate, Frey Rendell and Marquis Rendell, who has prompted such caution from your father, are blood relations? Asked Cyrus, once Sora and I had concluded our exchange. I have never asked Frey about her family, but it is not as if someone outside a noble house can use its name, so I think she is part of his family. Of course, adopted children and other arrangements were quite common in noble society, so I could not say for certain whether or not they were related by blood. What was for certain was that she belonged to Marquis Rendell's family. So Frey Rendell has been introduced as Prince Jedward's fiancé, and Marquis Rendell is engaging in unwanted meddling in the affairs of the House of Clays. These two facts must be connected, muttered Cyrus. Yes, they must be, I belatedly agreed. It would have been far more surprising if they weren't related. Only a few days ago, Frey, who looked up to Larna, had spoken of wanting to work hard at the ministry, with her eyes sparkling. Why would she, without warning, claim to be a candidate for engagement to Prince Jedward? I felt terribly uneasy. I wondered if Frey was all right. Marquis Rendell, a man my father who is rumored to be very formidable when not in front of his family, considers dangerous. Mr. Cyrus. I'm starting to feel very concerned for Frey's safety. It seems like Marquis Rendell is a dangerous man. Really? I know nothing about him, but considering what you told me about your schoolmate yesterday, along with what we know of the present circumstances, it sounds like that might be the case. In any case, I'm worried about Frey. If only she had a fiancé who could protect her, like Lady Susanna has. But I haven't heard about Frey having a fiancé. I mean, if she's claiming to be a candidate for engagement to Prince Jedward, then she can't already have one. Frey is currently living in the student dormitories at the Academy of Magic as a second-year student. The Academy isn't on break at the moment, so she must still be going to class, as usual. And the Magical Ministry and the Academy of Magic are on the same grounds. Mr. Cyrus, I think I would like to go and check on Frey. And I would like to hear about this from Frey herself. Hearing this, Cyrus looked conflicted. As your superior at the ministry, while I can grant you permission to leave for a brief period of time, speaking personally, I cannot bring myself to permit you to go and meet someone from a family that Duke Clays regards with such caution. Ooh. I can see where Cyrus is coming from. We just decided that I need protection, so it's understandable that Cyrus would say that going to Frey, who is related to Marquis Rendell, is not a good idea. But still. We are talking about my precious schoolmate, who holds me very dear. If she's in trouble, then I want to do whatever I can for her. I thought of Frey, whose eyes had shone so brightly as she spoke about her dreams. My adorable schoolmate, who had told me how much she wanted to work alongside me. I wanted to hear from Frey herself just what had happened to her, and why it had happened. I know how you feel, but, began Cyrus. Excuse me, but in that case, shall I go and talk to her? As I am a commoner, I should be in a position to move freely, interjected Maria, raising her hand. Hey, Maria, you want to go? I cried in astonishment. Looking me straight in the eye, Maria nodded firmly. Frey was my schoolmate too. Having listened to what you had to say, I feel very worried. As Miss Frey does seem very fond of you, Lady Katarina, I wish that you could go, but regardless of Miss Frey's personal feelings, the House of Randall itself does not think kindly of you. That being the case, I think it would be better for me to go. As I am not bound up in all of this, I think I can proceed without any problems. Certainly, Maria is not a noble woman, but a commoner, and therefore someone wholly unrelated to factional disputes between nobles. However, Marquis Randall looks to be a dangerous man, so I would be worried about letting you go on your own, Maria, I said. Maria had no bodyguard, and though she possessed strong magic, she could only wield light magic, which was not an offensive element. Nor did she have a familiar who could fight for her, as I did, so if anything happened, she would be unable to defend herself. As if she was aware of all of this herself, a troubled expression came over Maria's face while I spoke. A moment later, Cyrus opened his mouth, and said, "In that case, I will accompany Miss Maria." "Hey, Mr. Cyrus? Don't you have work to do?" Though I was pleased by his suggestion, I couldn't help but ask. After all, Cyrus's position as the director of the Ministry's Star Division, the Magic and Magical Powers Research Department, made him very busy indeed. Well, the department seems comparatively quiet today, so it should be all right for me to duck out for a little while. Besides, I'm worried about Miss Maria too. Although he turned just a little bit red after uttering these final words, for Cyrus this was a good effort. Perhaps I should say that he would go to any lengths for the woman he loved. "Thank you very much, Mr. Cyrus," said Maria, looking at Cyrus with her eyes sparkling. Cyrus himself looked very pleased. As the director of the Magic and Magical Powers Research Department, he possessed very powerful magic himself, and even without that, as the son of a Margrave he was an extremely capable young man. If he went with Maria, I would feel very reassured. Now I felt that I could ask Maria to go without reservation. If Mr. Cyrus is going with you, then my mind is at ease. "Maria, I'm counting on you." Maria nodded firmly in response. With all of that being decided, Maria and Cyrus returned to their department and announced that they would be leaving the office briefly before heading to the Academy of Magic. "I really thought that you would insist on going yourself," muttered Sora, once the two of us were alone in the room. "Why do people really think I'm that much of a blockhead?" Despite all my efforts, I had recently started to worry that I was becoming more like the Villainess from the games. But the next words from Sora told me something very different. "No, how should I put it? You have a tendency to forget yourself when the people closest to you are in trouble, and put yourself in harm's way. I thought that might be the case this time as well." These words caused me to remember the one thing I feared besides romance. Well, the thing about that is, at first I tried to find the right way to avoid the subject, but then I noticed Sora looking at me with concern in his eyes, and I no longer wanted to do that. I opened my mouth to speak again. The thought of suddenly being parted from someone dear to me really frightens me. Suddenly parted. Yet, there are times when I feel like I may suddenly find myself unable to see the people dear to me ever again, without even having a chance to say goodbye or thank you. So whenever something happens to someone close to me, I feel anxious. That fear had first taken root in my heart when I recalled the memories of my past life at the age of 8. Just like my fear of romance, I had always kept this fear under wraps, but when I was able to acknowledge my fear of romance, I remembered my fear of losing loved ones as well. But my fears were of course just another part of me, so I could not go on ignoring them forever. I had already decided to face them head on. "Has that ever happened to you before?" asked Sora, his eyes wide. "I guess so. How about you, Sora?" Though it has not happened in this life before I knew it, I had already been separated from the people who were dearest to me, without having a chance to say anything to them. "I guess so. I feel that way too, sometimes. That I should have spoken to someone more, while I still had the chance." Sora looked off into the distance with a sorrowful face. All of a sudden, he must have remembered someone to whom he had had to say farewell. I also briefly recalled my family and friends from my past life. My irritable but still loving mother, my father who doted on me just a bit more than he did with my older brothers, who for their part did not think of me as a girl, treating me instead like a little brother. There will be no this inserted audio clip if you buy the software license key or activation key. And of course my best friend, who shared in my hobbies. Even now, I felt a pain in my chest when I remembered them all. It was painful to know that I could never repay them for everything they gave me, not even a little. This year, I had passed the age I had been when my past life ended. In this life, I wanted to live a long time, to be a grandmother, and pay back the debt I owed to everyone that way. Well, now I understand that you sometimes feel anxious and get carried away, but are you telling me that you've become able to control those feelings? Asked Sora, coming back to reality and seeming like his normal self. I wouldn't say that I'm able to control them completely, but I just think what a waste it would be if I put myself in danger and caused trouble for everyone else important to me. This was something I had finally come to understand since learning to acknowledge my fears. Besides that, Sora, when I followed you without thinking during that one mission we went on, I was taken hostage and caused you a lot of trouble. I can't afford to repeat that mistake and inconvenience you again. Sora's eyes opened wider still. No, I let my guard down that time as well, so it wasn't only your fault, and, well, I don't really mind if you cause me a little bit of trouble. Sora, I felt deeply touched by my colleague's kindness. Still, I can't be doing that anymore, so I'll be careful from now on. I declared, before commencing my work decoding the Covenant. Only, I did end up worrying about Frey, and couldn't progress with my work as much as I wanted to. A while later, while I was still working sluggishly on decoding the Covenant, Maria and Cyrus returned. They had Ginger, our junior schoolmate, with them. Hey, Ginger, what are you doing here? I was confused, wondering why they had brought back Ginger after going to check on Frey. Well, we were told that Frey is taking a break from school at the moment. So, thinking that her good friend Ginger might know something, we went and asked her. But in the end, she did not seem to know anything about Frey's circumstances either. She did, however, have something she wanted to ask you about, Lady Katarina, so we had her accompany us back here. That was how Maria explained what had happened. Frey was taking a break from the academy. In other words, she was at home, at Randall Manor. My anxiety immediately grew more intense. For her part, Ginger looked absolutely crestfallen. Although she didn't know what was happening to Frey, there was something she wanted to talk to me about. Could it be something related to the matter at hand? Why is Frey taking time off from the academy? I asked Ginger. All I know is that it has something to do with her family. In fact, the last time I saw her, she suddenly received a call from home, told me I'll be back soon, and I have not seen her since, answered Ginger with a gloomy expression. Is that so? That did sound awfully suspicious. Now then, Ginger, what did you want to talk to me about? When I asked Ginger this, she glanced at Maria, Cyrus, and Sora in turn. Most likely, this was something that she did not want anyone besides me to hear. Maria, Mr. Cyrus. Could I ask you to please vacate the room for a short while? Sora, as you are my bodyguard for now, could I ask you to wait just outside the room? I said, looking at each of my colleagues in turn as I checked with them. They all complied. After saying, "See you once you're done talking," they all exited the room, leaving Ginger and me by ourselves. Excuse me. That was selfish of me, said Ginger apologetically before bowing her head. That's okay. You don't want anyone else to hear what you have to say, do you? That's right. Since it's not something to do with me personally, I wonder if it's really all right for me to tell other people about it. So whatever Ginger wants to tell me, it's not about herself. Considering the flow of the conversation up until now. Might this be something to do with Frey? I asked. Ginger nodded slightly. Frey told me this was the first time she had talked to anyone about it, and that it could change people's image of her if they heard about it, asking me to please not share it. So I didn't feel like I could tell just anyone. This answer was just like Ginger, who was always honest and considerate when it came to her friends. However, is it all right for me to hear about it? I asked, just to make sure. Ginger hesitated for a moment. If it is you, Lady Katarina, I think it would be fine. I think Frey would forgive me too. Frey always said that you are special, and a very important person to her. Frey said that. To be honest, I was shocked. While I had noticed Ginger becoming more attached to me, I never felt particularly close to Frey. Frey was very accomplished in both sports and her studies, and ranked high in both magical aptitude and social status. On top of all that, she was a young lady with remarkably good communication skills. So I had never found an opportunity to help her with anything, though she had helped me on many occasions, so I did not understand why she adored me so. I even worried that Frey might simply be under a misapprehension. But Ginger continued, Frey told me that something you said allowed her to change. She often reminisced that if it had not been for you, Lady Katarina, the Frey we know today would not exist. From the way she said this, Ginger almost seemed proud of herself. Come to think of it, I do remember Frey saying something to that effect. Something about the day we first met, though to be honest, I couldn't remember what I said back then. I did manage to remember what Frey was like the first time we met. She was so different back then that I could hardly imagine that she is still the same girl. Her expression was so very gloomy, and the look in her eyes told me that she had given up on everything. If the girl I met back then really was Frey before she entered the academy, then her life at that time can't have been a very happy one. That was the feeling I had. I took a deep breath. In that case, I must respectfully ask you to tell me everything you know about Frey, I declared, looking straight at Ginger. Ginger slowly nodded. This is what Frey told me when I asked her about her family, she began. Ginger said that the catalyst for her conversation with Frey had been a letter she received from her own family. Thinking nothing of it at first, she looked over the letter's contents in the student council room, before suddenly becoming angry and tearing up the letter. When Frey saw this, she asked Ginger what was wrong. As it was just the two of them in the student council room at the time, Ginger told Frey that the letter was from her family, and explained that its contents had angered her. In the first place, I am the daughter of a lascivious baron and a lowly servant he had an affair with. Baron Tucker has many such children, and all of them were taken away to live with their mothers. But as my mother passed away soon after giving birth to me, there was no one to take me in. With no alternative, I was raised in a cottage on the grounds of Tucker Manor, some distance from the main house. As the lowly daughter of a servant, my father mostly left me alone. Until my magical abilities awakened, I had never once met him. A few different servants took turns looking after me instead. I was dumbstruck. Ginger talked as if this was nothing of importance, but it was a horrible story. After my magical abilities awakened when I was 12 years old, I was immediately accepted into the Tucker household, as the first magic user in its history. A man who said he was my father suddenly came to the cottage and took me back to his mansion. His wife and children were jealous of me, which really bothered me. Magic users were considered precious even among nobles, so I had heard similar stories of children who were initially neglected receiving much warmer treatment from their parents after their abilities awakened. Still, I had never imagined that there was someone so close to me who had experienced that. Occasionally I would receive letters from the man who called himself my father. He would write that he expected great things from me, or some such. Reading these would always irritate me, and that day in the student council room, I tore the letter to shreds, as I always did. After I spoke to Frey about it, I asked her about her own family, and what she told me was truly awful. Worse than your circumstances, Ginger. I could not help but raise my voice. What Ginger just told me about her circumstances definitely isn't good, so if Ginger says someone else's family is awful, just how bad is it? Ginger was surprised to see me looking so shocked. My circumstances were not so awful. On the contrary, I had a good upbringing. But you were abandoned to live in a cottage and never met your father, right? Yes. So I hardly ever had to deal with anyone else, and enjoyed a free and relaxed upbringing. I froze up briefly at this response from Ginger. Living a free and relaxed life as an adult was one thing, but for a child, that was not freedom but abandonment, and not at all a good thing. That was at least how it seemed to me, but considering Ginger's feelings, I was reluctant to say so. I stood there for a while opening and closing my mouth, but could not find anything to say. Looking at me with my mouth flapping, Ginger started giggling. Tee hee hee. From an outsider's perspective, I know it might not sound good. As a matter of fact, having few interactions with other people did have the undesirable effect of leaving me unsure of how to get along with others, and I was entirely isolated until I entered the Academy of Magic. For a moment, Ginger fell silent. However, once I entered the academy and started to interact with other people, I came to realize something. I had been cherished the whole time. Cherished? I echoed. Was there really anything in the story I just heard suggesting that she was cherished? I felt like there was probably a question mark hanging over my head again, but Ginger nodded resolutely. Yes. Now that I look back on my upbringing, it occurs to me that the Baron definitely would not have assigned me individual servants himself. That means all the servants who waited on me in the cottage came in their spare time after work, out of the kindness of their own hearts, just to look after me. Thinking back on those days now, I even had books and soft toys that the Baron certainly wouldn't have gone to the trouble of buying for me himself. They weren't in especially good condition, so I think that the servants must have taken toys that the other children had grown tired of and brought them to me. They also occasionally left the sort of sweets children like as snacks for me. I very much doubt that they were instructed to do so, so I think this was also something they provided for me themselves. Ginger smiled warmly. Although I was not blessed with loving parents, I was lucky to have other people around who cared about me. I was the lowly child of a servant, left alone in a cottage away from the main house. It would not have been unusual for a child such as me to be abandoned entirely, but the servants all did their best to create a comfortable environment for me. They gave me tasty food, books to read, and toys to play with. They gave me a proper upbringing. Upon hearing about it at first, I could only think that Ginger's circumstances sounded terrible, but after hearing Ginger's point of view in more detail, I started to think that it might not have been so terrible after all. So, if I manage to get a job at the magical ministry, I want to use the money I earned to thank the servants who cared for me in the cottage back then. When Ginger spoke about those servants, it was with the same expression anyone else would use to speak about their family. As far as Ginger was concerned, the servants who used their free time to care for her were her real family. With her eyes wistfully half closed, I was sure Ginger was enjoying memories of that family. Then a startled look came over Ginger's face. Excuse me. I have drifted completely away from the matter I wanted to tell you about. What I wanted to talk about is what Frey told me about her family after I told her about mine. As she recalled the more pressing subject, her expression stiffened. I was also startled, and had to correct my posture. That's right, it's Frey's family we're worried about. Right. Tell me, what is so awful about Frey's family? Had Frey perhaps been abandoned, just like Ginger? Were there perhaps days when she didn't get to eat? Frey's family did not treat her like a person. Didn't treat her like a person. This was not the sort of answer I had expected. Yes. From a very young age, Frey was told that she was a tool meant to serve the interests of Marquis Randall. A tool to serve the interests of Marquis Randall. Repeating Ginger's words to myself, I couldn't imagine anyone speaking to another person that way, much less to a small child. In order to be useful to Marquis Randall, she was to maintain her health, study, and acquire skills. She was raised being told that she was born for that purpose alone. I stared, aghast. She was only served meals sufficient to maintain her health, and never had the chance to eat the kinds of sweets that children enjoy. She was given neither toys nor picture books, but instead made to study relentlessly in order to be useful to the Marquis. If she ever did poorly, the Marquis would become violent toward her, and she would sometimes have to go without food. I found myself at a loss for words, and could only gape in silence at Ginger, who was clearly trying hard to control her own anger. As I had been raised by a loving family in this life and my past one, I could not imagine what Frey's childhood had been like. The memory of the day I first met Frey surfaced in the back of my mind. Now I felt I understood why Frey had had that look in her eyes. If she had not given up on everything, she may not have been able to go on living. Even if she found something she wanted to do, she knew it would not be allowed, as her path in life had already been decided for her. A memory I thought I had lost returned to me. Somebody told me that I shouldn't give up, but should keep looking forward. But what am I supposed to do next? Can you tell me? A girl with a gloomy expression on her face asked me this in desperation. While wondering why she looked so desperate, I gave her the first answer I could think of. If you've decided not to give up, and keep looking ahead, I think the next thing to do would be to move forward. Move forward? The girl looked perplexed. Yep. Put one foot in front of you like this and step forward, I answered, before taking a big step forward. The girl stood frozen to the spot as she watched my demonstration. Hey, maybe this isn't the kind of answer she was after. I had begun to fret when the girl suddenly spoke again. Thank you so much, she thanked me for some reason. I think I would like to take a few steps forward before I start at the academy. There appeared to be a light in the girl's eyes that had not been there a few moments earlier. Go for it. After responding cheerfully, the girl turned and started walking, while looking squarely at what lay in front of her. As I watched her stroll away from behind, she somehow looked a bit more confident than she had just a few moments ago. It could have been that, from that day forward, Frey had decided to no longer give up on life. She left home, came to the academy, and really did the best that she could. After being subjected to violence from a very young age and having no choice but to resign herself to a life where she had to repress her own wishes, just how hard must Frey have fought to become the person she was today? Just thinking about it made my heart ache. I even felt tears start to well up in my eyes. Seeing this, Ginger spoke up with concern in her voice. Lady Katarina. I'm okay. Sorry. I was just thinking that Frey really must have fought hard to get where she is today, and I felt a pain in my chest. Ginger grimaced, as if reflecting on something painful herself, before finally saying, yes. Frey is an amazing person. Frey was not only a beauty, but accomplished in both her studies and sports, and she also held a high rank in society. She even had exceptional communication skills. Anyone would have considered this young noblewoman to simply be blessed. That was how I had thought about her. I was sure that everyone else regarded her in the same way. But I was wrong. While growing up in a horrific environment, with her path in life set for her and her own emotions repressed, Frey had managed to keep looking forward, even as she struggled. She was in fact an amazing person, who had contended with so much. And now she had most likely been forced into another unpleasant situation. Ginger, Frey has supposedly started to introduce herself as a candidate for engagement to Prince Jetord. When I disclosed this, Ginger opened her eyes wide in surprise. It appeared that this was not yet widely known, so I suppose I should not have been surprised that Ginger had not yet heard about it. What? No way. Frey told me many times that she had no interest in getting married, and that her goal was to work at the magical ministry. Besides, Frey looks up to you, Lady Katarina. There's no way that she would stoop so low as to steal your fiancé. Ginger almost screamed this objection. I had thought exactly the same thing. After all, Frey had just recently told me, with her eyes sparkling, that her dream was to work at the magical ministry. When I first heard about it, I also thought it was strange. I mean, it was only the other day that she talked about wanting to work at the magical ministry, but... Ginger, now that you've told me about Frey's family situation, I feel I can almost say this for certain. Frey is not claiming to be a candidate for engagement to Prince Jedward of her own free will. I'm sure that Marquis Randall has forced her to do it. And do you think that she's being kept against her will at Randall Manor? I think that's most likely the case. Ginger's expression contorted with worry, and after a moment she responded, Do you think Frey is all right? If the Marquis is intending to present her publicly as a prince's fiancée, there's no way he'd harm her. Or so I want to believe. Ginger, I won't speak about Frey's personal situation in too much detail, but is it all right for me to tell others that she's in trouble? A case like this is too much for me to handle on my own, so I'll have to ask other people for help. Ginger nodded firmly in response to my question. She then added, with an earnest look in her eyes, I may have little in the way of social standing or magic, but, if there's something I can do for Frey, please let me help. Gathering how strongly she felt, I, too, nodded firmly. Got it. After our private conversation, Ginger and I called Cyrus, Maria, and Sora back into the room. I explained that there was a high probability that what was happening was not in accordance with Frey's wishes, but was instead the result of Marquis Randall's selfish actions. I also explained that Frey was probably being held captive in her father's house to further his goals. I see. That being the case, what are we to do next? Asked Cyrus, once I was finished explaining. I spoke up. First of all, we must confirm that Frey has not been harmed. At present, it would not do for me to go by myself, so I think I will discuss this with some friends of mine. Good. Looks like even you've learned to think a little. My mind is at ease, replied Cyrus, looking relieved. I reflected on the fact that everyone seemed to think of me as thoughtless and reckless. Well then, as I would like to go and discuss this matter just as soon as I get in touch with my friends, I am thinking of going to ask my department's deputy head for permission to leave early today. Would that be all right? Since I was employed by the Magical Tool Laboratory, typically I would need to get permission from a direct superior, either Larna or Raphael, in order to leave work early. As this was an entirely private matter, I was slightly worried. As your only remaining task for the day is to decode your covenant, I don't see any problem with that, Miss Katarina. Given the circumstances, I will convey your wishes to Wold myself, so feel free to go and see your friends as soon as you are able to get in touch, offered Cyrus. I decided to take him up on his offer. And so I immediately went to send an emergency message to my friends. While I waited for my friends to contact me, I tried to concentrate on decoding the covenant, fidgeting all the while. Mary was the first to respond to my message. To my surprise, she came immediately in person to the ministry, explaining that she was already at home when my message came and had no plans for the rest of the day. A request from you, Lady Katarina, ought to be prioritized over everything else, declared Mary, with an air of pride. So you really didn't have any other plans? You are actually free? Now then, regarding the matter of our consultation. As I was not sure whether this room would be suitable, I booked us another one. This was just what I would have expected from Mary Hunt, belle of high society, a representative of capable women everywhere. That she had ensured we would have a room where we could all meet as soon as she arrived at the ministry showed just how thorough she was. I immediately put down my work, heading to the room Mary had booked for us with Ginger and my bodyguard, Sora. We were quickly joined by Maria, who was also worried about Frey. We soon arrived at the room, which was furnished in the style of a meeting room, and could be booked by ministry employees, as well as other people of appropriate standing. The moment everyone was seated, Mary started talking. Now then, concerning Frey, about whom Lady Katarina has said she is worried. In the letter I sent to each of my friends, all I wrote was, if you know anything about Frey, please tell me. My thinking had been that if I had been able to learn anything from my friends that way, then I could meet with them to discuss the matter further. At present, she is reportedly claiming to be a candidate for engagement to Prince Jedward, is she not? Continued Mary. You knew too, Mary? When did you hear about that? I happened to overhear it at a tea party a few days ago. Only, as I simply could not imagine someone like Frey doing such a thing, I have been working to gather more detailed information. I was still pursuing that end when I received your message, Lady Katarina. I surmised that you must have learned of the same news, and so I hurried here to meet you. Is that so? Thanks, Mary. Have you already managed to gather some more details about Frey? Let me see. For one thing, although I had heard that Frey Randall has claimed to be a candidate for engagement to Prince Jedward, in actuality, this is not a claim that Frey has made herself. It would appear that Marquis Randall has been declaring her candidacy while attending various social gatherings. So, it's just as I suspected. My theory about Frey having been coerced by Marquis Randall against her will to serve as a prospective fiancé for Jedward was strengthened even further. Excuse me, but why would Marquis Randall go around claiming that? I mean, there's not a single person in society who does not know that Lady Katarina is Prince Jedward's fiancé. Ginger somewhat timidly raised this question. Mary answered. I suppose that is true. I did wonder about that very thing myself. After all, saying such a thing at this late stage could even be seen as an affront to Duke Clay's family. I guess it is. In this aristocratic society, where strategic marriages were the norm, although the number of people marrying for love was starting to increase, engagements and marriages served a profound purpose in binding families together. Quibbling over an established engagement could be construed as picking a fight with the families involved. Marquis Randall seemed to have a fair amount of power, but the rank of House Clay's peerage was higher, and I had heard that my father was quite formidable outside the home, so I did not think he would take this lying down. Because of this, it seems that Marquis Randall began by spreading the rumor that you have no intention of going through with your marriage to Prince Jedward. Hey, he said that? Yes. He also said that you only joined the magical ministry in order to avoid marriage. Ugh. That was certainly the case at first. I had neither the confidence nor the resolve to go through with my marriage and join the royal family at the time. So I must acknowledge that there is truth in that accusation. I floundered for words. The thing about that is... He went on to say that you came to realize how much you enjoy your work at the magical ministry, and wished to devote your life to working here, rather than become the prince's wife. He then asserted that you have come to be regarded as exceedingly capable at the ministry, and that they cannot stand to lose you. Ugh. As of late, I certainly have managed to discover enjoyment in my work, but really, what is this? Can Marquis Randall read my mind? I've never even met the man. The part about me being exceedingly capable is, however, completely made up. Still, it isn't as if he has besmirched my name, so maybe my father wouldn't get angry about that. On the contrary, technically Marquis Randall has even praised me, and much of the rumor he spread is true. And so, Lady Katarina, the Marquis argued that if that is your intention, then why should Prince Jedward not take his daughter for his fiancée? From that point on, he has maintained that Frey is a candidate for engagement to the prince. What can I say to that? There's a lot of truth in what he says. Some people may well be convinced by it. In all honesty, if I was asked to marry Jedward at this very moment, I don't think I would have an answer right away. But I finally decided that I would face the feelings Jedward has for me. What father had once said to me, "You may lose that feeling before you even know you have it," was starting to take on a new sense of reality. Well, for the time being, let us put aside the question of whether or not Prince Jedward and Lady Katarina will call off their engagement. We still cannot ignore the fact that Frey has been presented as a new candidate against her will, declared Mary. Was so the rumors about my engagement to Jedward being called off aren't a cause for concern. Although Mary had considered all kinds of facets of the situation, she let this question pass by almost too casually. Still, I decided to follow her example and let it pass by as well. Is this really okay? Moving on, do we know if Frey is at the academy right now? Asked Mary. Ginger answered she's not. After a message came from her family a few days ago, she went home and has not been back since. Is that right? That is at odds with the rumors circulating within noble society. Marquis Randall has said that the reason Frey has not personally announced her candidacy for engagement to Prince Jedward is that she is too busy with her studies and her student council duties. Mary knitted her brow before continuing. It could be that Frey is being held captive at Randall Manor for not complying with Marquis Randall's plans. Upon hearing this, I felt a chill go up my spine. When I was told what sort of person Marquis Randall was, and about Frey's upbringing, the thought had crossed my mind, but hearing someone else suggest it made the possibility seem all the more real. Frey might be being held captive. Shouldn't we go and save her right now? I stood up from my chair, but Mary shook her head. Lady Katarina, if we march over to Randall Manor right now, we will only be turned away, with no chance of seeing Frey. But Frey might be in danger. What can we do? She might be suffering more senseless violence as we speak, and if that is allowed to carry on. As I began to imagine the worst, I felt that I could not simply sit and wait a moment longer. Lady Katarina, please be calm. Marquis Randall is trying to prop up Frey as Prince Jedward's new fiancée. After putting his daughter in that position, he cannot afford to harm her. Moreover, she is only taking a break from the academy, and will have to return at some point, so I am sure he will not do anything too extreme. After this persuasive argument from Mary, I paused before reluctantly agreeing why you rewrite, then sighed and settled back down in my chair. I shouldn't be doing this so soon after deciding to break my habit of rushing into things without thinking, should I? While I reflected on my behavior, Mary, sitting beside me, continued speaking in a slightly more cheerful tone of voice. However, I am amazed to think that Frey, that doll princess, ever found the courage to stand up to the Marquis. Doll princess. I repeated, as I had not heard the phrase before. Mary explained that is what people used to call Frey Randall behind her back, before she entered the academy. Because of the hollow look she always had in her eyes, and how fake her smile looked, someone started calling her that. I didn't know she had such a nickname. Although it was difficult to imagine given what Frey was like today, when I recalled what Frey was like when I first met her, I supposed that she might have looked that way. Not only Frey, but everyone else in the Randall family, with the exception of Lady Susanna, his legitimate daughter, gives off much the same expression. It would seem that Marquis Randall's treatment of his family is just that severe. I could detect a hint of anger in the final words that Mary spoke. Mary was probably aware of just how horrendous Marquis Randall's treatment of his family was. Even so, she could not speak against someone with as much influence as the Marquis. Just what kind of person is Marquis Randall? I inquired of Mary. I wanted to know what kind of position the Marquis occupied in noble society. Let me see. Well, in any event, he seems to have a strong desire to acquire more power. He has the air of someone who judges people based on whether he thinks he can exploit them. I have only exchanged the barest of pleasantries with him, but in those brief moments I could sense that my worth was being weighed, which was not a good feeling. But the fact remains that he is a powerful figure in society, so I would suppose that those around him are reluctant to enter into conflict with him. It seemed that even Mary considered the Marquis to be a troublesome individual. While I was starting to consider just how we were going to save Frey from the clutches of such a man, a knock came at the door. It was followed by the sound of a familiar voice. "Excuse me, may I enter?" Silence reigned for a beat. "What are you doing here so soon? Come on in." After muttering something to herself quietly, Mary, who had booked the room in the first place, granted our visitor permission to enter. Big sister, I thought I'd find you here. Lady Katarina. With these greetings, my adoptive brother Keith and my friend Sophia entered the room. They told me that they were here to see me, and had asked another employee where they could find me before coming to this room. Keith, what about your work? I was sure that Keith had work that day. Though I had tried to contact him, all I had hoped for was to talk to him once I got home. I did not expect him to come all the way to the magical ministry. I was working at home today, so there was some flexibility. Really? Still, this could have waited until I got home. Although doing that would not have been practical with everyone else, Keith and I lived in the same house. Well, when I read your letter I was worried you might do something reckless, and didn't feel like I could focus on my work, so I decided to come and hear what you had to say first. As expected of my brother, who had been picking up after me for over 10 years, he understood my behavior very well. After all, if I had not stopped to accept Mary's input on this occasion, and consider a number of different viewpoints, then I might well have marched over to Randall Manor already. Well, you don't have to worry this time. You already warned me about Marquis Randall, and I know I mustn't cause trouble for Sora, my bodyguard. After I said this, Keith responded, "That's good to hear," sounding relieved. He then got a wistful look in his eyes, and said, "My big sister has finally grown up." His expression was almost like that of a mother looking at her very young child. It was because of his habit to say such things, and make such expressions, that I could not help but feel like calling Keith Mom. Well, I guess I have caused him as much trouble as I once caused my mom. Sorry I mean, Keith. I was also at home when I received your message. As my older brother was at work, I was unable to get in contact with him, but I felt restless just sitting at home, and before I knew it I was on my way here, reported Sophia, a worried expression on her face. Though it had not been my intention, it looked like I had caused everyone to worry. Once again, I was forced to reflect on my typical behavior. After a moment, I asked Keith and Sophia what they knew about Frey and Marquis Randall, but they had no new information. As a matter of fact, Mary still seemed to know more than anyone else in the room. Keith did not seem to know anything about Marquis Randall beyond what we had talked about previously. However, it turned out that he had been aware of Frey's situation, and had deliberately avoided talking to me about it. "Why didn't you tell me straight away?" I asked Keith. With a sigh, Keith replied, "What I'd heard was still uncertain, and I didn't want you to do anything reckless until we knew more, big sister." To be fair, I had been about to do something reckless just a short while earlier as soon as I learned about her situation, in fact so I could only hold my tongue and hang my head. Noting my chagrin, Mary spoke up on my behalf. That being said, Lady Katarina was so terribly shaken because the news was sudden, so I think it would have been better to give her at least some amount of explanation from the beginning. "I guess that's true. Sorry, big sister. I promise I'll tell you everything next time," Keith apologized after thinking for a moment. "I'll be more careful in the future too, and stop to think before doing anything dangerous," I promised. However, just what is Marquis Randall planning on doing? Is he hoping to create a new faction in support of Prince Jedward, putting himself at its center? Right now, Prince Jeffrey's faction is still very much at the head of the pack, so is such a thing even possible? Mused Keith, tilting his head in contemplation. Though I cannot discount the possibility that he is planning on switching over from Prince Jeffrey's faction, perhaps he is only seeking to keep Prince Jedward close at hand, as insurance? He may think that Prince Jedward will be easier for him to handle. Keeping Prince Jedward as insurance, you say? I don't think he'll find him so easy to control. Marquis Randall and his allies probably don't know Prince Jedward or the members of the other factions too well. Prince Jedward himself probably cannot be bothered with all that infighting, so perhaps he has resorted to feigning friendliness around anyone involved in it. Ah, you may be right. I was shocked by Mary and Keith's accurate suppositions about, or perhaps I should say awareness of, Jedward's character. In the game, he was in fact shown to have a sinister side. To be honest, I did not think Jedward was likely to quietly do someone else's bidding either. However, if Marquis Randall is keeping Frey confined within his house, there is a high probability that he has made some attempt to get closer to Prince Jedward as well. Considering that, it could be that on this occasion, Prince Jedward knows more than we do. Lady Katarina, did you send Prince Jedward a letter as well? Asked Mary. Ah, yet. The same note I sent everyone else, I replied. It was at that moment that another knock came at the door. Would the phrase "speak of the devil" be appropriate? Please, come in. Mary gave the person at the door permission to enter, but we were surprised by who it was that appeared. Hey, Prince Alan. It was Alan, Jedward's twin brother and Mary's fiancé. Since Alan had come, I thought Jedward may have come too, but casting my gaze around Alan, I could not see Jedward anywhere. Oh, are you here by yourself? It was extremely rare for Alan to come alone like this. Yet, replied Alan, frowning slightly. I felt a sense of unease, which I couldn't quite put my finger on. Has something happened to Prince Jedward? Asked Mary, with a serious expression on her face. Jedward isn't really free to move around much at the moment, was Alan's unexpected reply. Prince Jedward isn't really free at the moment? Is he all right? Is something wrong with him? Although Prince Jedward seemed invincible, he had a surprising habit of pushing himself too far. As a result, he often looked tired, but had he finally made himself ill? I was worried. But Alan shook his head. There's nothing wrong with Jedward himself. Never better, in fact. But there are some troublesome people adhering closely to him. Troublesome people? I repeated, tilting my head. Mary, sitting next to me, blinked before asking, might these people be somehow related to Marquis Randall? Yeah, I guess you guys already know what's going on. When I got that letter from Katarina, I thought that might be the case. No, I would not quite say that we know what is going on. All we have managed to gather are rumors circulating throughout society, so we do not yet know anything of the truth. We were all just in the process of sharing what information we do have. Prince Alan, could I ask you to please tell us what you know about Prince Jedward's circumstances? Asked Mary, her expression still deadly serious. Alan nodded firmly. Yet. After all, that's why I decided to come here, he agreed, before going on to tell us about Jedward's situation of late.